Say the thing, David. Say the thing.
You stole my story.
Oh, TikTok, time to rock.
Perfect.
Hey.
Welcome to the channel, everyone.
Hey, it was cool how you combined the theme songs and stuff, but I can't get over the fact that your name is literally Mike Jones. And you don't start off with Mike Jones. Who? Mike Jones. Jones got love from my fans till the day that I'm gone.
Yeah, because I like my streams getting monetized and not demonetized for stealing that. So yeah, that's mainly why.
It's very considerate.
Oh, I mean, you could adapt the lyrics and then it becomes parody.
Yeah. Well, welcome everyone.
We're
David Wood decided
discussing the tragic death of the new.
Yes, David Wood decided to crash the stream at the last minute. He's like, "Can I join?" Like 3 minutes ago, and I was like, "Okay." So here he is. I thought you were in West Virginia. So I thought you were busy.
Please let me join, please.
Yes, I was, and got. Yep. I was over the weekend. Got back Sunday, and then was too tired to go live. So here we are.
Perfect. Welcome.
Hey, look at this. David is behind again. It's like this happened last time, and he was blaming it on my internet connection. But it's happening again. He's hearing us.
Am I behind?
Yeah,
you're really behind. Yeah, you're like a good minute behind us. I don't know why.
Yeah, because I'll say something super awesome, and then you respond like 5 minutes later. So I'll out and then jump back in. We'll see if that fixes it.
Yes, do that.
That'll do it.
Matter of fact, I'll go ahead and close out of everything.
Get out of here.
All right, I'll be back. I'll be back with nuclear weapons.
He'll be back. David Falk's in the channel. Welcome. Appreciate it. Egyptologist checking in on us to make sure we are not saying anything incorrect about Egypt. LBJ says a few bucks to go towards a faster makeup artist. What am I, ugly or something? Or is it AP that's ugly? Which one of us is ugly and needs makeup? I don't know.
Probably me.
You need to scruffle up that beard of yours. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, answering LDS is Dr. Falk in the chat. Yep, he's been on my channel recently talking about Exodus, and you check out those live streams recently, and he'll probably be back. So, Buff IP says based. Actually, that was me. I put that super chat in because I'm Buff IP, so everyone knows that.
How's this work?
Good.
I think that's better.
Better now? Okay.
Yep.
We're on time.
Yeah. How about David? Let's on 3 say yes. 1, 2, 3. Yes.
Yes. No. Hey guys. Not sure you commies know this, but today is Veterans Day.
Yes, I'm a veteran.
Really? And you're not even celebrating Veterans Day?
I was in the Air Force for a few years.
Well, in honor of Mike Jones and all the other brave men and women who died for our freedom, we should begin with the ceremonial blowing of the shofar.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her shield today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. Hey.
Yeah, this used to be a respectable channel. I remember those things.
IP, you're not quite old enough to, but back in the 80s, they used to make us learn that song in school. Like patriotism was encouraged. Not so much anymore. We all had to sing that in school back in the day.
I had to learn that in the 90s. I had to learn that. I remember being in music class and singing that. Yeah.
That was still a thing. Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
The Dizzle missed AP so much he invaded IP's channel. That is true. He did. He invaded. He came in just like a crusader and just took over this Turkish invite, and it was over. I don't know what happened.
That is true. That's what they do.
Nick Fredo's got doxxed. Where are David and AP to condemn this?
Did he? Did he get doxxed?
So there was some drama going on earlier today where some liberal grandma apparently was informed of that he lives in her neighborhood, so she went to his door.
Yeah.
Whoa!
What happened is he put out a tweet that said, "Your body, my choice."
Yeah,
that pissed off everyone, rightly so. And then in response, feminists doxed his information, put out his address, and then this liberal grandma went to his house to look around, and then someone else showed up, apparently dared her to go ring the doorbell. She did. Nick swung open the door, pepper sprayed her, knocked her to the ground, took her phone, and left. And went
Are
back
you
inside.
crazy?
Yeah.
Seriously.
That's what happened?
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
all
pretty
over.
much.
Everybody was reporting it, and you have photos of his face after he took her phone away and threw it on the ground. Looking at the camera.
Your body, my choice. That's what's weird. This is why Immanuel Kant said that the only thing good without qualification is a good will, because anything else, if you combine it with a bad will, would actually be bad. So like intelligence, if you really you think intelligence is a good thing. Okay, well, what if it's combined with, what if it's an evil dictator who's extremely intelligent? That's bad. Same thing. What if someone is legitimately hilarious, but sick and evil? That's Nick Fuente, your body, my choice. Okay, that's legitimately funny way of trying to tick people off, but it's combined with Nick Fredo's.
Well, the thing is, it also sounds like really good rage bait, really good trolling. Like really,
that's what I mean. He's intelligent and funny combined with being an evil scumbag.
Yes,
pretty much.
Dangerous combination.
Alhamdulillah.
Thoughts on Alex O'Connor's videos on Genesis? I've not seen them. I could take a look, but we're going to be reviewing a interview he did with Justin Brierley on his moving away from New Atheism today. That's why we're here to talk about it, because he says a lot of the things I have been saying for years, that New Atheism is not a worldview. It's just a way to attack other worldviews. And eventually he says people get tired and they moved on from it. And that's what I've been saying for years. So,
and there are multiple things there, but yeah, we'll get into some of that.
Yeah.
By the way, it didn't say Alex O'Connor. It said O'Connor's. How do you know he's not talking about like Sandra Day O'Connor or something?
Is what is that? Sean? No, not Sean Connery. I'm thinking of someone else, but I don't know. Maybe he is. Maybe maybe some actors do have some videos on Genesis. I have not seen it though, but my fave three, much appreciated. Welcome.
What if he's talking about Conan O'Brien? See.
Oh, maybe. Maybe. Who knows? All right. So I'll play a little bit of this video. He brings up Islam towards the end, and the reason why I wanted to invite AP specifically is because he sort of like makes the case, like he brings up a debate he had with a Muslim, and the Muslim is like, you shouldn't be attacking religion because it makes people happy. And I want to make the case that atheists and Christians should keep attacking Islam because Islam is harmful, causes all sorts of problems. The argument only works if a religion like Christianity is a net positive. And I would argue Islam is a net negative in terms of how it adds to society. So, yeah.
Quote that, everybody. Islam is a net negative.
Sure is.
Mike Jones, Inspired Philosophy.
Yeah. James of Modern Day Debate is hopefully sometime in 2025 looking to make a debate happen with like a big Muslim channel on which is better for humanity, Christianity or Islam, because I got a bunch of data.
Islam, we're the only one who can subjugate everyone who disagrees with us.
Pretty much.
The only one who can save you from liberalism. You see.
Yes, they marry all the girls off at 9, so they never hear about liberalism.
Yeah, I did not see this video yet that we're about to watch.
I haven't either.
We'll see.
Oh. Yeah, just let me know when you get stopped. This is like part of the way through because the earlier parts are talking about like his early teenage videos he thought were cringy, and so he's moved on from that. And then they start talking about New Atheism. So let's dive right in.
What do you make of the movement as a whole, though? Because arguably, I would say possibly that in your early years of your channel and your content, you were sort of riding a bit of the wave of that New Atheism, and obviously influenced by some of its architects. But what do you think? Where do you think we're at now with that movement as a whole that kind of influenced your?
What's up? Oh yeah. Hey Mike, you're gonna have to be aware. Me and AP, we pause after every 5 seconds.
Well, my only question, my only concern, which I think requires some clarification before moving on, which I would say most of the chat would agree is, they call it new atheism, but considering that it is now old, pretty much, and it's also in his past, is it really new atheism, or is it kind of like, is it old atheism, or
Most
is it
recent atheism.
new old atheism?
Yeah, it is weird because you
Was
can
it
have
old
like
new atheism, or is it like middle atheism? Is it
middle-aged
atheism? What is it exactly?
Yeah, that is
And,
an
and,
interesting
and
point.
how do you define what stage and what age it is at? Is it like a human? Is it like Aisha? Is it like a girl? How do you exactly?
Yeah, this has been around over 2 decades now. This is not that's a good point. You get a new pair of shoes and you say these are my new shoes, but a couple of years later you don't say those are my new shoes anymore.
Yes.
But you can't just call it atheism because it is different. I've been pointing this out in videos that like in the 80s and 90s, you had a group like American Atheists. So you had Madeleine Murray O'Hair, who was really aggressive, and you had the occasional atheist who was angry and aggressive and angry that there are people who disagree with him or her and so on. But overwhelming majority of atheists didn't care a lot what other people believed, and most of them back then tended to think that it's good. Like, hey, if going to church and stuff like that is somehow helping you and believing in an afterlife is helping you, then fine. What do I care? And then the new atheism comes along and it's no, everyone has to agree with us, and it's like it became evangelistic because there is an advantage in ideologies that are where the adherents are encouraged to spread it, and it really matters. So Islam is like this, you have to spread Islam. Christianity is like this, you spread the gospel and so on. It's hard to make atheism like that. So like, how do you do it? It's like there's not like some substance there where you say here is what makes this so important. So in order to get people in that we're here to save the world mode, you have to really dial up religion is going to destroy the world like really, really soon, and we're all going to die and we're all going to be doomed unless we stop it right now. And therefore we can be the saviors of humanity if we go out and spread atheism. So then it flipped from, hey, whatever you guys believe is fine, what do I care, it doesn't really matter. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if it's not terribly affecting me, like jihad and so on affects me, but in general it's not affecting me a whole lot. And so people didn't care a whole lot. But then it became, no, if anyone disagrees with me about religion, they're going to destroy the world and destroy science, and we have to convert them to atheism first.
It's kind of funny how I made a stupid comment about new atheism, and it started a whole useless debate here.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it was always new atheism was basically it's not only that religion is wrong, all respect for religion is wrong. It needs to be wiped out. And it was like you were saying, this evangelical aspect of it that just didn't exist before. And again, it was against all religion, mostly Christianity, because that was the dominant religion of the West. So that's kind of why it, came to be what it is.
Early material. I think that it's become commonplace for people to say that new atheism is either dead or dying. It's still quite difficult to define exactly what new atheism is, but I think we sort of...
I can do it.
It's like they say of pornography, it's impossible to define, but you know it when you see it. Yeah, that kind of thing, We all know what we're talking about with new atheism here. And I do think it's true that the popularity of it has declined, and I think that's got something to do with the meaning crisis that I know that you reference in your book. The idea that it's almost like we didn't have enough time when you're watching these debates, and it's about the existence of God, and you become compelled to think there's no evidence for God. And just slipped in is this piece about, and a worldview based on science is far more awe-inspiring and fulfilling than religious one anyway. And you sort of, yeah, sounds great, beautiful. But then, people have actually tried to live it. They try to live with the conviction that there is no God, that the heavens are empty, that there is no objective morality, that everybody just gets to decide for themselves, what they want to do, and find themselves a bit nihilistic. Yeah. And so even if they can't bring themselves to say that the new atheists were incorrect, they're less enthusiastic about it as a movement. Now, of course, there are people who don't do that. Like not everybody who's like an atheist becomes a nihilist, and not everybody thinks that you can't have objective morality without God or whatever. But I think that this is a common thought. I would receive emails and messages from people who say, "Oh, I saw your video about free will, and it convinced me there's no free will, but I'm having a bit of an existential crisis about it. How do you live like that?" Or sometimes people just saying, "Look, I've lost my faith in God, but it was so meaningful to me that I don't know what to do with myself." I think that maybe.
I get the opposite emails. I get emails from people saying, I so appreciate that video. I was losing my faith in God, and this convinced me God exists. Or I was losing faith in free will or the Bible, and this convinced me it was real. And so, I mean, I think it's interesting to hear that from the other side, that they're getting these emails about, you're convinced, but then you have these nihilistic implications, whereas I'm always getting emails of the opposite. And I think that's what ties in to the bigger picture of what Alex is talking about here. Is that new atheism is not a worldview. It's a license to go around and attack other worldviews without ever actually establishing anything like a firm foundation to stand on and build an actual community, build a society, build a worldview on. And that was the main problem with it. It was so evangelical in its form, but it wasn't actually evangelical about anything. It was just evangelical in the sense that we need to destroy everyone else's worldview or foundation without ever replacing with anything. And eventually, I think people just get tired of being angry all the time, and they want something to actually stand on. This is why a lot of new atheists moved on to politics, because eventually you want something to defend and not always be on the offense. That was the problem with new atheism. It's just always on the offensive, but you're never defending anything. So many of them just moved into the political world because that made more sense as something they could defend.
Yeah, the what the new atheism did, and this is this is why it took off so rapidly, is they basically taught a bunch of young people shortly after 9/11, pretty easy to convince people, look what religion does in the world. That's when you got all these memes. Religion, science flies people to the moon. Religion flies people into buildings. And so that's what religion does, and so on.
Clip that.
Yeah. And they basically taught people a very simple methodology of playing skeptic. We'll teach you guys we'll teach all this younger generation to play skeptic and to say, that's no evidence at all. Now, they understand nothing about confirmation theory or how to, they know nothing about what qualifies evidence or what evidence means or anything like that. They're just taught that's no evidence at all. And they don't realize it's really easy to play skeptic. Sometimes in the comments, when I'll get you could tell the difference between a sincere atheist, and what I mean is sincere in the sense of wanting to have a serious conversation about what the evidence is and so on, and an atheist troll who just wants to argue and go, prove to me that God exists, religitard, that kind of guy. Right. When I encounter those guys, I have zero interest in having a conversation with them because they're just playing skeptic. So when they message me, I actually just try to play skeptic back with them, and what I do is I say, okay, happy to, so that I'll get a message. Hey, prove to me that God exists, religitard. And I'll say, okay, but I don't want to have a conversation with a person who might not exist. So before we get started in this conversation, first prove to me that you exist. And then 0% of atheists have ever been able to prove their existence to me when I'm playing skeptic. Why? Because it's very, very easy to say, how do I know you're not a bot? How do I know you're not AI? How do I know I'm not in the Matrix? How do I know I'm not a brain in a vet and some mad scientist is making me think that you're here? How do I know? How do I know I'm not dreaming right now? It's very easy to do that, which is all they do. Maybe this is what caused the universe. Maybe this is what, maybe. And so, I mean, with especially with Dawkins and everything, saying even if God wrote a message in the stars, he could still attribute it to powerful aliens, and therefore no need to appeal to God for something like that. Anyway, this is why the new atheism took off. They showed a bunch of people how to play skeptic, and they convinced them that religion is, if they don't do it right now, religion is going to destroy the world, and therefore, if they can stop religion and get enough converts to atheism, it will save the world. But they made all these sort of vague promises, and sometimes explicit promises, that it's going to make the world a better place, and we're going to be heading towards some sort of scientific utopia. But society is going to become better as more and more people become atheists. And that I think is at the what's behind what Alex just talked about, that people are, when that kind of wears off, when the honeymoon wears off, you know, you've got your cage stage atheism. I'm going to run out and save the world. I'm going to convert people to atheism. We're going to get a scientific utopia. And here you've had almost 2.5 decades of that. And they're looking around going, the world is not becoming a better place. We are not becoming more rational. We are no closer to any sort of scientific utopia. This didn't go the way we thought. And it's like they had set it up as a massive, like almost like a scientific hypothesis. If you do this, then this is going to happen. If we get millions of people to become atheists, then society is going to become better. Then we're going to become more scientific. And they're looking around going, nothing, not one thing that we thought was going to happen is actually happening. And instead, all we're getting is it's like we're paving the way for Islam to take over, because as IP was pointing out, when you don't have something positive to unite around, there's no real substance, there's no real thing that you're united around. Something that comes in there and is aggressive and does have something to rally them is just going to eat you alive. And that's what we're seeing now. And I think lots of atheists are waking up to that reality and saying, we need to pump the brakes here because this is not going the way we thought.
Yeah, and I would like to know, I actually had a debate. It was recorded. It should be up on my channel Friday with sociologist Phil Zuckerman. And he's one of those guys that says that atheism, you know, secularism is so much better for the world than religion. But one of the arguments I raised to him was this, is like, listen, you have abysmal birth rates in secular societies.
That's
and
true.
What's happening is you're being replaced by Salafi Muslims who are now coming in and taking over the culture. Is this not indirectly a bad effect of secularism in that you have abysmal birth rates? You can't generate progress and you get taken over by by less optimal cultures. I'm not one of those people that says religion is all good. I'm one of those things that say, because I think Scientology or Salafi Islam is bad. I'm one of those people that says that Christianity is good and it's a net gain. But if you have something like secularism where you have abysmally bad birth rates, you basically set yourself up for societal collapse in the sense that you just get taken over by another culture and immigrants coming in. So you have this indirect bad effect from secularism. And this is one of the bad issues with new atheism. It somehow leads to lower birth rates as just part of the larger umbrella of secularism does.
And by the way, I made a video. This was probably like 10 or 12 years ago that I made this video, but I pointed out Richard Dawkins in his famous, they were called the Christmas lectures, but it's part of some big series and so on. Anyway, the booklet that he put out to go along with this lecture series, in it, he said what human beings are. And he said, you are a machine for propagating DNA. Like, he's just looking at what you are from the perspective of science. You are a fancy, your entire body, you are one big fancy machine for making copies of a molecule. That's what you are. That's what you're programmed to do. And so, but then he added this really creepy line. Whenever I quote it, atheists flip out. No, that's not what he meant. No, that's exactly what he meant. But he's talking about, like, in an objective sense. What can I actually verify? What I can verify is that your purpose is that you're a machine for propagating DNA. That's what I can look at you. I can examine all your parts and I can say, this is what this thing is for. If you have some other purpose, you say, I want to go rally for this. Okay, that's not something I get from just observing your structure and looking at your parts and so on. But anyway, he said, human beings are a machine for propagating DNA. Propagating DNA is every living creature's sole purpose for being, right? It's your sole purpose, making copies. And so anyway, I took that and I made a video out of it. And I said, well, then Islam is actually good at helping people fulfill their purpose. And atheism is the worst thing for helping people fulfill their purpose. If the purpose is if your purpose as a human being is to make replicas of yourself, to produce offspring, then atheism is the worst thing that there is. And Islam is actually the best thing that there is. But so, and then if you take it, so I was just pointing out that according to his own criterion of what the purpose of a human being is, atheism is detrimental to your purpose. Islam is the best thing in the world for your purpose. But yeah, if you're taking that a step further, the actual implications of massive secularization, if the more people become atheists, the lower the birth rates drop. Guess what? If once you get to 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, once you get to that level of birth rates, you're no longer even able to replace your parents. Guess what? Your government is not going to allow your population to drop, and you no longer have enough people entering the workforce to work the jobs, what will they do? They will bring in more people from other parts of the world. And where are they going to get them? The place where people are replicating the fastest. And that's Muslims. Yep. Everywhere you go, that is Muslims. So the new atheism, the real takeaway is, that's why I said it, paving the way for Islam. So you have an ideology that is inherently weak. You have all these promises that they made that they haven't kept. You have the plummeting birth rates whenever they go secular, and you have Islam has the highest birth rates. And so you need to bring in more people. And so atheism does what? It paves, I'm talking about the new atheism, the aggressive kind. It paves the way for Islam, like inevitably. And they're picking up on this. They've looked around at the world. They've looked around London and gone, what did we just do? We thought this was going to be, we're going to be living in the Jetsons right now, and we're not.
What did we just do?
That debate will be on my channel Friday, I think around like 2 Eastern. I got the footage and I will upload it. My debate with Phil Zuckerman on which is better for humanity, Christianity, or secularism. And hopefully one day I can do that with a Muslim, which is better for humanity. But so far, no takers on that one because I think
we're better child marriage
problems. Yeah. All right.
Enough people feeling that way, and the people who sort of talk about new atheism being dead often describe an experience like that of themselves, that, you know, they've realized that it hasn't put anything worthwhile in its place. Means that, like I said, doesn't mean they can say the new atheists were wrong or incorrect, but it's not like a cause they're going to rally around. It's not going to give them a roadmap for how they should live their life, just being told God doesn't exist in that sense.
Yeah, and that's the thing I've been hitting on, is that you see a lot of the new atheists. Like there was a guy named Cult of Dusty like 10 years ago who was huge, and he just got into politics and eventually left YouTube. And I see a lot of the smaller new atheists didn't get the popularity they wanted. So I mean, you don't give people a roadmap. That's exactly what I've been saying. What's the point? And what's the point of doing all this?
Here's the thing.
Religion.
It was just it was never really meant to be, or it was never it never even began to be a proper movement on its own. It was only described by some or seen by some as one, because at some point certain speakers like Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and Dennett became very popular as these representatives of people who speak against religion, who criticize religion, and who talk about how we don't need religion. It was, over the last 20 years, I don't know, it probably died out pretty much within the last 10 years or so. But over the last 10 years only, it rose as a little bit of a movement, as a trend rather than a movement of people expressing skepticism and criticism. On the lowest level, it was through online memes like I'm also I'm an atheist. I also like you believe. How did that phrase go? I never adopted that stupid phrase. I believe in one God less, or something like that.
Oh yeah, it's
you're an atheist with respect to all the other gods. I just drop one more God than you.
Ooh,
Yeah, I
so
thought that was dumb.
Brilliant, so smart.
That's like saying that would be like a vegetarian saying, you don't eat most meats. You don't eat tigers, lions, gorillas, all that stuff. You only eat a couple of meats around the world. So I just go, so you're a vegetarian with respect to all those other meats. And I'm just a vegetarian. I just go a vegetarian a little bit further than you. It's like, I'm not a vegetarian at all. I'm not a vegetarian with respect to lion meat.
Yeah. So it was a on that level, on the online low rudimentary level, it was just a bunch of memes that became popular, that then died out. I mean, those accounts are not around anymore, and if some of them still are around, they're not really gaining any traction. They're not doing anything anymore. They have moved on. They have shut down. They have gone into different things. You have Alex O'Connor. He's a great example. His channel used to be called Cosmic Skeptic. He changed it into Alex O'Connor because the trend is no longer there. It's no longer It's no longer a thing, because the whole, oh, I am a rational, I am an intelligent, questioning, skeptic being.
Yeah, everyone had
That's who
rational or
I
skeptic
am.
in there.
Rational, atheist, thinking, superpower brain atheist. This whole thing just died out. It doesn't exist anymore. And it was just with social media rising and people being able to suddenly express their opinions and say whatever they want on such a massive scale on the internet, I guess it briefly became a trend that these people who don't believe in their local religions, who don't go to their local churches or whatever it is, went online and started expressing their atheism in the laziest ways. And it's no longer special because social media was new. People said it. And now it's no longer special. We have moved on from it. It was never meant to provide a path forward, like building something on this path, building a new system on this, which is why it's basically a trend. It's not a movement. We are now moving on from it, and all those who jumped on the trend at that time are now doing different things.
Yeah, this is the meme you were talking about. I made a response to it like many years ago. It's just a silly.
There have been
silly
nearly
argument.
3,000 gods so far, but only yours actually exists. The others are silly, made-up nonsense, but not yours. Yours is real.
Mm-hmm. You can do that with any worldview. It's you just believe this one worldview is true, and it's a stupid argument that actually they thought was based.
Yeah, you can do that with pretty much almost any belief that you can come up with. You can say, oh, okay, you believe that's right, but other people have believed other things. So what, are we just supposed to not believe anything? We are supposed to not believe our beliefs because other people believed other things. It's it's silly reasoning. Silly reasoning. That was important what Alex is pointing out when he mentioned that there are people who believe that the atheists are right, they're correct, but they're kind of dialing it back, like maybe we should not be out there spreading this so rapidly until we've got some things figured out. In other words, I mean, if you took atheism seriously, you'd be kind of AP when he still considered himself an atheist in terms of, okay, all that really matters there is what matters most there is kind of practical implications. This one wants me beheaded. This one doesn't. Okay, I don't care about, I'm not worried about what that person believes. It doesn't really matter. You're going to die. And if you believe in something it doesn't really matter. And if it makes you happy, then what do I care? And so on. If you're out to chop my head off, that's a different story. If you're out to kill people who leave it, that's a different story. That's very, practically speaking, that is very dangerous and needs to be confronted. So anyway, as far as what actually makes sense, it doesn't make sense from an atheistic perspective to be obsessed with everyone agreeing with you, especially if you look at it and the consequences are bad. So and the way to kind of see this, because we're kind of all tied up in, Christianity and Islam and atheism here in the West. Imagine a completely different scenario, right? None of us here believe in Hinduism. We probably think that there are lots of silly Hindu beliefs and stuff. So imagine we decide to go over to India and start correcting them. And we're not offering any substitute. We're not offering a replacement. Suppose we just go over there and we're just blasting away at Hinduism and we're showing that Hinduism is silly and so on. Suppose we do that for a while and we suddenly realize, hey, as we are blasting away at Hinduism, it's being replaced by Islam. Well, we might believe that Hinduism is silly, but it seems like at some point you would say, wait a minute, we're blasting away at Hinduism and it's being replaced by Islam. We need to stop what we're doing right now. Even though we agree and we do not believe in Hinduism, it's kind of a worse situation to have it replaced by Islam. And therefore maybe we need to pause what we're doing here. And so I would agree completely with Alex, even from an atheist perspective. If you look around and saying this is not going the way we thought it would or the way we hoped it would.
Listen. I want to say something briefly about this as well. Once again, I kind of started changing my mind on all of this when I started getting into Nietzsche, and I want to address one thing. which is that one of the most misunderstood phrases in the history of philosophy, which
God is
is
dead.
God is dead, where Nietzsche isn't actually celebrating the death of God or pointing out that this is a great, wonderful, amazing thing, or saying, oh, God was around and he no longer exists. It's actually a much deeper narrative that has greater implications, which is he's pointing out that for millennia, humans have learned to abide by a certain moral system, by a dichotomy of right and wrong, good and bad, and so on. It was all based on the idea of God, and God was always there, regardless of whether you believe in the existence of an actual God or not. However, recently, with new movements in philosophy that are emerging, people have begun to get rid of God as an idea, as a concept. And so what he's pointing out there is God is dead, and he's not saying hooray, wonderful, fantastic. On the contrary, he's saying this is actually terrible. This is a horrible thing. He says,
unless
God
you can replace it appropriately. Yes. And there's a question of whether
he says, God is dead and we have killed him. What have we done? And we are killers, murderers, and so on. So his whole philosophy at that point, from then on, is basically on he's warning that if you go into an atheistic mindset, you will very likely fall into a very dark and destructive, but foremost self-destructive form of nihilism, which is what society should never go toward. So he presents then an alternative, and this is where his ideas get a little bit wacky. He then presents an alternative of finding a better way to live despite the death of God, and not go into nihilism, but develop a wonderful superhuman morality and new values to live by, and so on. He got one thing right, which is that humans learned for millennia
a lot of things right
to live by these values and live by these beliefs and these morals. By getting rid of it, you are opening yourself up to a very, very depressing, dark, messed up, self-destructive form of nihilism, and you don't want to be there. So he acknowledges that something has to replace it. Something has to replace it. With the new atheist movement, for example, you have people going around thinking, "Oh, we don't believe it. We don't believe in God anymore. We don't need God anyway. You know, it's just garbage. We don't need religion, and let's just move on. Let's just do whatever." Okay, that's cool for you to say in the moment. However, you're subjecting people to a great emptiness that is on a psychological level very bad, and that also collectively, societally speaking, opens up your society to great dangers, like David, for example, just mentioned the influx of Islam.
And this is one of the things I want to ask a lot of the atheist YouTubers, like Paulogia, Rationality Rules, like Myth Vision. Like, what are you doing? Like the actual psychology doesn't match like the beliefs as you were talking about. If you can't demonstrate Christianity is harmful, why are you actively trying to get rid of it in society? Like, why are you not taking the Voltaire approach? He may not believe, but he really hopes his maid is a Christian. Now, when it comes to something like Islam, that's different. When you're actively trying to oppress women, you can show negative effects result from Islam. Then there's a reason to go after that, because that's actually a utilitarian idea. It's actually going to decrease overall well-being. That's not the same with Christianity or some of these other minor religions like Sikhism, for example, or even Judaism. Why are they going after them with such? Why are they going after Christianity with such ferocity, when it's only going to contribute to a declining society with like lower birth rates, which will ultimately lead to population collapse and will cause like more traditionalist and maybe even harmful societies to take over, like Salafi Islam. That is a scary thing to think about. So like, if you really are an atheist and you just believe you're going to live for like another 40 years or so, why not just live your life and enjoy it? Why are you actively going after something that makes people happy, makes society better? Was crucial for the development of modern science, crucial for the development of hospitals and orphanages and spreading literacy, and created missionary activity that raised literacy rates across the globe, as I point out in my video, how Christianity changed the world. Like, why would you actively try to deconvert people from this religion when it has been so beneficial and still is? It doesn't make sense. If I was an atheist, and I've said before, I'd be like Tom Holland or Tim O'Neill. I may not promote it, but I certainly wouldn't be trying to deconvert people from it. I'd just be talking about history and things I like. So it doesn't make sense for some of these atheist YouTubers to be so evangelical in how they go after Christianity.
There's nothing to celebrate about it, about deconverting people. It's dumb.
Yeah, it's a weird situation. And all this ties together, by the way. But like when a Muslim is going around preaching Islam, that makes complete sense from a Muslim and Islamic perspective. When a Christian is going around preaching the gospel, that makes complete sense from a Christian perspective. Going around insisting that everyone has to leave religion can make sense when you're in that, in 2004, that can make sense. If you think, hey, atheism hasn't really been tried in the world. We could do it better. You don't have any real basis for thinking like that because it hasn't been tried. You have no evidence that a society will function really, really well if everyone just becomes atheist. So you had kind of an excuse back then, 2004, 2005. Now we're in 2024, almost in 2025. How's that working out for everybody? Okay. Now we have some evidence of what happens. It doesn't work. It doesn't make society better. It's not an improvement. And therefore, from an atheist perspective, we go where the evidence points. Okay, the evidence shows that society becoming more and more atheistic does not improve it. In fact, it paves the way for Islam. So if you guys have an empiricist bone in your body, this would be a good time to learn where the evidence is pointing and so on, and to use that in your steps forward. But what you have, you mentioned some of the atheists who still cling to, like they're 20 years ago. What I really think it is the new atheism. It kind of had some cult tendencies in the sense of, hey, join our group and you're special. Join our group and you're part of the smart group. If you're outside of our group, you're the dumb group. If you're inside our group, you're the smart group. And that feels good. That feels good being part of the smart group. We're the smart ones. Everyone else is dumb. That feels good. And if you're like that for 20 years, we're the smart ones. Everyone else is dumb. And then you're realizing, oh, this isn't going the way we thought. Then you kind of want to get back to the glory days. And so you have some who are smart enough to go, okay, we need to stop until we figured more out, until we understand things better, because this isn't working. But you have those others who are just, no, I liked being the smart one who looks with contempt who looks upon everyone else with nothing but contempt because they're the inferior beings and I'm the smart ones. It's hard to get out of that. And so you have people who are clinging to that. But yeah, what you actually have here, it's like, I mean, you could title what's going on right now as proving Nietzsche was right about that, right? And that's something that was this is all related to what's going on now. Back then you had the Germans, and there were more Germans who understood the actual implications of what was happening than the British. The British tended to be, oh, what are you talking about? We're a couple of us are becoming atheists and we're fine. What do you need that for? The Germans, people like Nietzsche and some of the Fallen who actually became nihilists, they understood, no, this is actually really, really big. And Nietzsche's actual perspective was, if you're getting rid of God, you need something really big to replace it. And if you do not have something really big to replace this, you're going to end in massive disaster. And we're kind of seeing that right now. The new atheists come along. Let's get rid of religion. They have nothing. They don't have the big thing. They kind of promised that they did. Scientific utopia didn't work out that way. And so now people are finding out, oh, this is way bigger than we thought. But this even came up a little bit when Jordan Peterson was having the discussion with Richard Dawkins. Dawkins was kind of remarkable. Like, what do we need religion for? We can just live like, wonderful people and stuff. And Peterson said, I think it's great that we got to a place in history where you guys, even atheists, think that the values now that we all subscribe to are just natural and self-evident.
Right.
This is just how we are. And he goes, because we're not. This is not how living things are. This is not how human beings are. Human beings can be completely sadistic and messed up in every way and just do horrible things to each other. It's great that you guys are now convinced that this is just how human beings are. It's great. That's a lot of development. But that's sort of Jordan Peterson reflecting on atheism. And Dawkins still seems locked in that, well, if we become atheists, then we're just going to become like me. And we'll all be these enlightened, philosophical, scientifically minded atheists who are focused on the facts and so on. And
David,
people are looking at that going, it's complete nonsense.
In my debate with Phil Zuckerman, I brought up this issue. Like, he said, like, we're just, when these aren't Christian values, these are human values. And I said, well, I cited like scholars like Karl Vandertoorn, Jean Bottero. it showed him that, like, in the ancient Near East, people didn't think like this. They prized honor and shame, not empathy and mercy and equality. And he said in the debate, well, that's just batshit historical nonsense. Like, he said the actual historians didn't know what they were talking about. And I'm like, new atheism, man. It makes you so arrogant sometimes with some of these
AP's grinning right now because he's thinking about Nietzsche again and what Nietzsche thought about Christian values and how they're made for the weak and so on. And so it's not natural. It's not natural.
He called this slave morality, making the meekness and all that good.
By the way, isn't it interesting that it can be so? But it takes centuries. But you get to the point where compassion and mercy and all these things, loving other people, even if they're your enemies or other people in the world, viewing people as created in the image of God, and therefore having certain rights just built into them. And now people think, and now you've got even atheists that, of course, this is all true, after they've ripped out the foundation, which made sense of all of that. And they're still clinging to it. And then once they start wiping out religion, they're like, what's going on? We don't understand what's going on here.
There's something very ironic, which is that the new atheists or atheists of our time today who don't subscribe to any religion, but who are in the West, who are in a former Christians, or who are in a Christian environment or post-Christian environment, whatever you want to call it, even when they criticize Christianity or the Bible or whatever it is, and when they say, oh, this is very unjust, this goes against human rights, and this is discrimination and oppression and so on, they're very often simply basing their criticism and their feelings of what is wrong about these Christian teachings on Christian teachings themselves. They think in a Christian way. They adopted a very Christian way of thinking, of being compassionate and considerate of others, and are then, without realizing it, in a very ironic way, criticizing Christians with a Christian based morality. You will not find that atheists in the Hindu world, for example, or atheists in the Chinese world, for example, are quite like the atheists here in the West, who happen to be very, very, very Christian in their way of thinking.
Yeah. Will you ever have Ray Comfort or Cliff on? Actually, funny story. I messaged Ray Comfort a couple years ago to see if he wanted to come on my channel to have a conversation about theistic evolution and creationism, and he turned me down. I think I'd be fine talking with Cliff. I think I was actually on his channel a few years ago, so you could probably check that out.
I wanted to ask him about the banana, Ray Comfort.
That would be amazing. I don't think he will let anyone ask. I think that's part of, like, when he goes on interviews, he tells people, like, you can't bring up that blender. I think so. I'm a veteran, yay. Air Force, just messing. God bless. Yeah, I was in the Air Force. I think I got it in like 2007 or 6 or something.
Oh, you're in the, yeah. My grandma was the 13th woman who joined the Air Force. They started it. They started Women of the Air Force. No, it was actually funny because now she's kind of losing her faculties and she's blurting out all this stuff that is like hilarious to me. But she said, so they finally announced that they're going to have a batch of women join the Air Force and stuff. And so she signed up after the original dozen. And so she signed up, and when she, they put her in front of a podium and stuff like this to, whatever it was, but they had the officers and stuff there saying you're the woman in you're the 13th woman of the Air Force and stuff. She said one of the officers walks by and leans in and says, "Beware the dirty dozen," and walked away. And she said she had no clue what this meant. But she's telling it to me right now. She's really kind of old and losing. Anyway, she pulls up a picture of the first 13 women of the Air Force, and she goes, "It took me a while to figure out what it meant, but then I eventually figured it out." She shows me the picture of all the ladies. She goes, lesbian, 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 lesbian. She goes down the list. And apparently it was understood that if you're straight, you become a wife, but if you're a lesbian and you're not, then you can join the military. It was understood that lesbians are the only ones who are joining the Air Force, and so she had no clue, and she joined it, and she found out over time.
That's very based.
It's kind of funny that my like almost 90-year-old grandmother is telling me this and stuff and just breaking it down. But it's like she's telling any story. She's like lesbian. So I found out what the dirty dozen meant, and I'm like dying laughing and so on. Anyway,
yeah. Good to see the best closeted atheist, closeted Christian, and closeted Catholic back for another stream. Wait, which one's Catholic?
That would be you.
Is it
closeted Catholic? That's what you are. I'm the closeted atheist. AP is the closeted Christian, and you're the closeted Catholic.
All right. Well, I'll do the sign of the cross.
All three could apply to me as well, to be honest.
It's true. Happy V-Day. Why is AP above David? He should be on the bottom like a good Timmy. Put an AP on the bottom and make him pay the jizya. Pay your Christian jizya to us, you atheist.
How dare you?
David Wood, I was worried about you. I thought you were dead because AP told me. You said... Wait, what?
Oh, this is so messed up. You know, wow. I'm just remembering this now. But so yesterday I was live, and people were asking where David is, and I kept saying, oh, I don't know, he might be dead. I have no idea. I messaged with him yesterday, but he might have died in the meantime. I don't know. Nobody told me that he didn't die, and so on. I was joking about this. But then, you know, I told you how when I take melatonin, I sometimes have very, very weird, messed up dreams. Anyway, later that night, I took some melatonin because I thought, okay, I really have to go to sleep. I don't want to stay awake. So I fell asleep. But then I had a dream. In my dream, I get a call saying that you got into a car accident and died.
Well, it's kind of scary because you are a self-proclaimed prophet, so I guess we'll find out.
And the thing is, in my dream, I also remember that I told people live that, oh, David Wood probably died, and then it has come true, and you actually died, and I'm like, what? How did this happen?
Well, hey, what's funny is also when I texted, when you said, hey, are we going live tonight? I said, no, just got back. I'm dead. That's how I responded. I'm dead. I went like dead tired. Guys, this is the second trip I had to take to West Virginia. My mom died a few years ago, and all her stuff was in 2 storage units that I was hanging on to until my brother, John, got out of prison. So, but it turns out I could have done this at any time because he's just like, yeah, I want the stained glass lamp and 1 or 2 other things that he wanted. Anyway, I could have found that. I thought he wanted to go through stuff, but so in theory, I could have paid someone to clear out those storage lockers because there wasn't a lot, anything I was interested in. Just drop it off at a Goodwill or something like that. But my mom had a serious drug problem and left needles all over the place, and I really couldn't tell someone else. I mean, I guess I could have warned them, but I didn't want someone to actually get jabbed with a needle or something like that while grabbing stuff. So anyway, I decided to do it myself. But that was a freaking nightmare. Two full days doing that. That's the second trip. And then after spending all day, finished and then drove home and then get home, and AP said, so want to go live? And nope, I'm dead. And it was
confirmed.
Bad.
Can't wait for new postmodernism. That would be hilarious. Please explain objective morality in layman terms. Okay, how to explain this in layman terms? So there are objective prescriptions and obligations we have that are beyond human limitations that we are morally obligated to keep or to perform. Would be the simplest way I could say it, that these are just prescriptions beyond human limitations or cultures or societies that are true regardless. So if a human, it's always going to be morally wrong to rape because that's just objectively wrong for humans.
Yeah, I would just add very quickly, especially if you're thinking about moral obligations. So if you take something, CJ, like do not murder, not even talking about the Bible right now, but if you take a claim like do not murder, notice that's a command, right? Do not murder. And you say, okay, what is the status of that command? Like, where is it coming from? What is that? What is that rule? Is it someone's opinion? Is it something that was kind of hardwired into us biologically by some sort of herd instinct? Is it something that our culture taught us? Is it just something that, family taught us or something society tells us? Or is it something beyond that? Because if it's just something you're biologically wired to do, that doesn't have a lot to do with right or wrong, right? Like, a lion who moves into a new pride of lions will kill all the baby lions to make room for his own offspring. He's wired to do that. He's wired to do that, and that helps him produce his own offspring and so on. but you don't say that that's like right. It's a good thing to do, even though he's wired to do that. So saying that you're somehow wired to help someone else or something, that doesn't mean that you have a moral obligation to do it. Some people just based on their wiring want to beat people up and do messed up stuff, right? So you don't say that the way you're wired makes the claim do not murder true. But also if you just got it from society and society told you, no, do not murder, does that mean that it's a real moral obligation? Well, guess what? You have societies that tell you to do all kinds of, you have societies that say, hey, let's toss all these Jews in this oven and so on. You can't say that a society told me to do it and therefore it's correct. So what is the ultimate status of that? And divine command theory is a claim that our moral obligations are ultimately commands from God. It doesn't mean that you got it from a book or something like that. There are all kinds of ways God can communicate a message to people and so on. But the idea is that it's actually something that is beyond our biological wiring. It's beyond society. And it's something that has the authority to issue these kinds of commands. That's what objective morality would be.
You know, it's funny. I just asked ChatGPT to explain objective morality to me, and I'm 4 years old. And it said, imagine there are certain big rules about being kind and fair, like always sharing and not hurting others. These are special rules that are right for everyone, no matter where they are or who they are. Even if someone says it's okay to break them, like pushing someone down, it's still not okay. So some things are always right or wrong, like sharing is always nice and hurting is always mean, no matter what.
That's actually funny. I'm surprised they weren't like, okay, imagine Elmo from Sesame Street is annoying you. Can you gouge his eyeballs out? No.
That's the 4-year-old West Virginia version, David. Love what you guys are doing. Just had a question in regards to David Bentley Hart. Have you heard of him? What are your thoughts? Well, I've never heard of him because he's never not a herd animal. But what I've heard is that he's a universalist and a Catholic. So I think that's... I don't agree with his universalism, but I think most of his other stuff is pretty cool. I don't know. I've not actually studied him that much. David Wood, loved your Dawkins cognitive faculties video, but how could you classify naturalism as a complex theory when atheists think that a universe out of nothing requires less of the cognitive faculties?
Wait a minute. So I'm trying to think because I made several videos about Dawkins. Okay, so that's where I kind of went into sort of a hybrid C.S. Lewis, what's called the argument from reason, or Alvin Plantinga, it's called the evolutionary argument against naturalism, about if our cognitive faculties simply developed to help us survive and reproduce, which is what they'd be selected for from an atheistic perspective, then how do you trust them with things that go massively beyond that sort of thing? In other words, if your cognitive faculties are meant to help you find food or find a mate or design a spear to fight against an enemy, how do you trust it? How do you trust your cognitive faculties when you're talking about philosophy or metaphysics or anything? You're not made for anything like that. But Dawkins admitted that in a recent video. He's shocked that human beings can understand things like the origin of the universe. But how can you classify naturalism as a complex theory? I don't know what you mean by naturalism as a complex theory. When atheists think that a universe out of nothing requires less of the cognitive faculties. Yeah, I don't know. Do you understand what he's asking here?
No, I'm kind of confused as well because I've not seen that video, so I can't comment on it.
Yeah, I'm not classifying naturalism as a complex. Yeah, I don't know what you mean here.
Yeah. Thank you for becoming a channel member. The Four Horsemen of New Atheism could not preserve their views.
It's John the Pressbiter. You missed it.
John the Pressbiter.
That's right. That's from an Ali Dawa. That's from an Ali Dawa video. They don't even know which John they're talking about, yeah, because they don't know if it's John the Apostle or John the son of Zebedee or John the Pressbiter or John. And we're watching this going, John the son of Zebedee is John the Apostle. What are you talking? There's not a bunch of different John. Anyway.
Presbyter,
Yeah.
in it.
The Four Horsemen of New Atheism could not preserve their views for more than a decade, and the only reason Christopher Hitchens never changed his mind is because he died before the New Atheist fall. Ooh. I don't know. Can't really say for sure. It's just, I know he's been criticized a lot. Nathan Johnstone wrote a book called The New Atheism. He just went into Hitchens, just complete and total ad hoc reasoning, where he classifies Stalin as like a religious person, but Martin Luther King Jr. isn't, because he said nice things. So just anything that's good is not of religion, and anything that's bad is of religion, was Hitchens' argument. And it was just riddled with circular reasoning and ad hoc assumptions. And didn't really take it seriously. All right, I'm gonna start the video back up here and play a little bit more, because he brings up eventually at some point brings up Islam in relation to this.
I guess one of the key claims of the New Atheism is that religion was not only false, but bad for you, bad for the world.
Mhm.
Is that something you have held yourself? Is that something you still hold today? Have your thoughts changed on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've said in the past that saying religion is bad is a bit like saying politics is bad. There's a sense in which that's deeply true. Everybody hates politics. And in a sense, if somebody says the world would be better without politics, you know what they mean.
Yes.
Like, yeah, okay, fair enough. But like, it's not to say that there isn't a correct political view. I mean, if there's enough variance in religious belief, and even somebody
Did you
who
say smart?
believes,
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. The exact same thing. I was thinking, Alex is freaking smart, man. And
Yeah,
usually
that's a very
he
smart
He
response.
comes up with lots of analogies. He just does this automatically. You bring up something and he'll explain it in other terms, but he is good at that.
Very smart
yeah.
response.
true religion will have to think that religious belief is responsible for a great deal of evil because there are so many false doctrines surrounding them. And so to say religion is bad is kind of it's a bit, if it's true, then I think it's trivially true because there's so much variance within religious thinking. But the question of whether like religious thinking, this is the criticism that's often made. It's not so much religion, but that kind of thinking, faith-based thinking, the willingness to sacrifice evidence in favor of wishful thinking, this kind of thing. Is that bad? Well, it's probably not going to help you get to truth. It probably leaves you prone to indoctrination, radicalization, this kind of thing. But will you be happier for taking that approach? Maybe. So it kind of just depends on what your metric is. Indeed, that's probably why people do it. And that's the atheist criticism. They say, well, of course, like people are going to be happier doing that. That's our entire point, is that's why they're doing it, not because it's true, but because it makes them happy. But I think, some people, especially as they get older, especially as they get closer to death, might think to themselves, well, okay, but what do I want here? That isn't happiness, and we often told a lot of the time by atheist moral philosophies like utilitarianism that happiness is actually the goal here. In which case, why are we doing these debates? Why are we like going around trying to convince people?
Yeah, and that's one of the points I've often brought up, like with a lot of the new atheists. Like if the goal is happiness, why are you spending your life just arguing with religious fundamentalists online? They're just going to piss you off constantly. Like,
But it's going to make me feel superior, and that feels good.
No,
It
it's
doesn't make
because we
sense.
have to have these debates so that we can bring a future in which finally these debates will be over and we will all be happy.
Yeah, and we'll finally be completely subjugated by Islam.
And
yeah, Eric Kaufman wrote in his book, he responded to the new atheists. He said, and he's not a Christian or a religious at all. He says, notwithstanding the new atheist, one has to admit that religion is more rational than unbelief. As a utilitarian, I believe that maximization of collective happiness is the proper end of humanity. And on that score, religion seems more rational than irreligion. A growing body of research suggests that the religious live longer and are happier than skeptics. Noted British economist Richard Lalord, a pioneer in the field, writes, one of the most robust findings of happiness research is that people who believe in God are happier. At the individual level, one cannot be sure whether belief causes happiness or happiness causes belief. But since the relation also exists at the national level, we can be sure that to some extent belief causes happiness. So why are we constantly, why are some of the new atheists constantly trying to deconvert Christians when if it gives them more self-control, better mental health, more happiness, well-being, who cares? Just you go be happy as an atheist playing video games or doing whatever. Why actively try to deconvert people? It's a very weird thing. C.S. Lewis wrote in the Screw Tape Letters that when people arrive in hell, they will say, I did not what I ought and not what I wanted to do. And I just feel like a lot of the new atheists spend so much time doing things that are just irrelevant to their the remaining 40 years of existence. Is this really going to spend your life just debating with strangers on the internet who are always going to like, and ultimately what happens, you just deconvert a few people, they go into nihilism like Alex was talking about earlier in this video. What's the point? When it comes to Christianity, it doesn't make sense.
It's because people like to people like to, you call it evangelizing, to make the analogy, which people simply like to share
You're
their
trying to be
own
like Alex.
convictions with
AP wants to go in the analogy so he can be smart like Alex O'Connor.
people want to. Now you threw me off. What was I saying? People want to share their own convictions with others because I think honestly, most people, even when they're aggressive atheists who seemingly are so convinced that they are that there is no God, it's all nonsense and so on,
You won't be humiliated.
they actually rely on other people also confirming and affirming what they believe. So they want to share their views with others and convince more people or gather more people around them who think like them. I mean, everybody has this whole sense of insecurity where they are convinced that there is no God, for example, but they have to put this out there to get reactions and to have it confirmed by many other people that yes, God doesn't. Do you agree that God doesn't exist? Yeah, we agree, right? We all agree that God doesn't exist, right? If somebody comes and disagrees with this actually makes for a little bit of insecurity and less
Atheists are
happiness. So you have to spread this idea. I mean, the same would go for religion, for religious thinking. If you're a religious person, unless you're a psychopath like David,
Stop attacking religion and psychopaths.
If you're a religious person and you are by yourself and you are convinced by yourself that a certain religion is true, it will probably feel uncomfortable and unhappy to not be around other people who also have those ideas. You want to share your beliefs and your convictions and your hopes with others, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then becoming an atheist and actively fighting religion and making your entire religion, basically, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I pretty much agree right now with the whole idea that the whole new atheism itself is kind of like a religion. But you turn your criticism of religion and your bashing of religion into a religion and try to find others to share this with so that you don't feel lonely. It's a little bit sad.
No, well said. That makes
It's
a lot
pretty
of
pathetic.
sense.
It's pretty pathetic. We can all agree. We heard it here, folks. AP says the new atheism is pathetic, and you guys are saying, "Oh, you need your sky daddy." And it's like, no, you need all your little atheist friends, and you need to convert people so you don't feel so lonely. And it's all super pathetic. I will make this extremely simple for the atheists out there, kind of bringing together what we've been talking about. If you have a society and like people have been historically rallied around Christianity, and they have, even though they have disagreements in different churches and stuff, there are certain things that they agree on and certain values they agree on. And you say, hey, we need to go in there and wreak havoc on these ideas and so on. And then all of a sudden you find out 20 years later, oops, we're actually like destroying Western civilization because we had nothing of substance to replace this with. Common sense would dictate you kind of need to pump your brakes there, but I will speak to you from an atheistic perspective, from the perspective of an atheism, like what actually would make sense. If you're an atheist and you actually look around at the world and you see what's going on, what are your options here? What are your options here? Well, one, you could keep doing what you're doing right now. Well, we've been blasting away at atheism. I mean, at Christianity for 20 years and stuff, and lots of people have become atheists, and so let's just keep doing that. But you've seen the consequences, and there are two possible options here. One, you're going to be conquered and subjugated by Islam, and so as much as you didn't like Christianity because your grandma made you go to church, keep in mind there are worse things in the world than your grandma making you go to church, right?
No, they're not.
So that's one option. Option one is you will be forcibly subjugated by Islam. The second option, since you guys have nothing real to replace Christianity with, you will get a tyrant to rescue you from Islam. In other words, you will eventually realize that Islam is subjugating you, and you will rally around some tyrant who is going to protect you from Islam. The cost will be all the freedoms that you have come to love are going to be, you're going to be under the control of a tyrant, which would probably be better than being under Islam, but you'll be controlled by something else. In order to avoid that, if you don't, that's what happens if you keep doing things the way you want. If you were an atheist and you actually wanted to replace religion with something that will work, because what you're doing right now, it's not working. You have to go back to like Plato's Republic and like designing an ideology that will help people behave in certain ways. And like, I mean, they're talking about like engineering an entire, like the stories and so on, and the myths and so on. And you have to do, in other words, you have to do massive social engineering and planning for the future. And that actually ties in with Nietzsche. You would need something big, like you need a massive, big project where you are going to replace the old ways with some new way, and you get it exactly the way you want. I don't think it's going to work, but that's the only thing that could possibly get you where you want to go. So the point is, until you are in a position where you can do massive social engineering and program people to behave in certain ways and to believe in certain stories, or even a religion that you invented in order to keep people in line, until you are able to do that, your other options are Islam or a tyrant. And so this would be a good time to say, we need to stop until we can do this big thing to replace God. We need to just sit back and not be blasting away at the foundations of our society.
That's what they do.
That's what they do.
Well, Alex is about to bring up Islam indirectly, and I want to push back a little bit on what Alex says here. Not like
Pretty racist.
We will crush him.
not like in a hostile way, because I think I get the general point he's making, but just specifically with Islam, I think there's an issue there.
The debate with Sabur Ahmad, a Muslim, he's part of like the Dawa scene.
There's that guy in the middle.
And at one point in the debate,
I don't know.
I remember him saying something like, well, if you think that like maximizing pleasure, minimizing suffering is the metric for morality, then why are you here? Why are you doing this? Even if you think it's true that there's no God, if studies show that people who believe in God are happier and more fulfilled, then don't you have a moral obligation to shut up? He didn't put it in those words.
He should have. That's funny.
I remember thinking afterwards about that and thinking like, yeah, that's an interesting question. Maybe there is something about the decline of new atheism that's got to do with the fact that even if people still think it's true, they think, that it's going to make people less happy somehow, and therefore they don't want to spread it anymore.
There's something very funny about this, which is the question is actually good, worded by Alex here. The question is good if you are thinking about a society in which everyone is Christian and you become an atheist, for example. Then it's a good question. If you are thinking, if you put Islam into the equation, then it's not necessarily a good question,
Right?
Because if you bring Islam into it, then it would be better. It would be beneficial. It would be for the betterment of society to speak against Islam in order to prevent it, or to somehow help prevent it from spreading and taking over society, or turning more people into sad Islamists. But that's a different matter, which is why I have said forever now that I don't think that there's anything cool about anti-theism, but it's absolutely necessary to oppose Islam and speak against it.
That's not what I wanted to bring up. I mean, with the question proposed to Alex in the debate is why go after like religion? Well, again, if the religion is good or is not causing any harm, that makes sense. But we have empirical research that shows Islam is harmful. Like, just to give you like a little bit of taste, here's one study where they talk about they looked at Protestantism, Catholicism, and Islam. And in this model, the specific model they use, to get any sort of meaningful, significant results, you need to have at least a 0.01 or higher. And if you look at Protestantism, it's positively associated with political transformation, voice and accountability in government, citizen empowerment, political stability. But Islam was non-significant with all these measures. Catholicism was a mixed bag, but Islam was non-significant with any of them. So it's not going to help with anything like citizen empowerment or voice and accountability or even political stability. And then when you start looking at specific things, I've talked about these meta-analysis before, but Islam allows and promotes polygamy, but systematic reviews and meta-analyses have found that polygamy leads to more mental health issues for the women and the children involved. They get things like psychoticism, anxiety, hostility, phobic anxiety. All of these issues come out of polygamy. And so it actually causes women to actually deteriorate in their mental health and have poorer quality of lives overall. This is a book that Daniel Haqiqatjou was talking about at one point. He probably didn't read it because he goes through various metrics. And when it comes to, for example, like issues with women in Islamic societies, he says the female to male literacy rate is generally lower in Muslim countries than elsewhere. Thus, the expected female literacy rate as a percentage of the male rate is 21 percentage points higher in a country with 0% Muslims than in a country that is all Muslim. And as you can see the chart here, you can see how bad it is for women when he ran his regression models here. He also points out when it, just for living, just general life expectancy, the females in a country with 0% Muslims are expected to have a life expectancy advantage that is 2.5 years greater than do females in a country that is 100% Muslim. So just women's life expectancy drops when you have countries that are majority Islamic. And you can see, again, here's the regression model showing this. It's pretty bad. There's another study on veils. So women that are forced to wear veils, they say in line with the hypothesis, perceiving no choice in wearing a veil consistently related to worse affective experiences and did not relate to life satisfaction. However, opposite to hypotheses, wearing a veil to avoid feeling bad or avoid social disapproval related to more positive affective experiences, though notably wearing a veil to avoid social disapproval predicted lower overall life satisfaction. So having women being forced to wear a veil did not lead to lower life satisfaction. So you can actually throw that back at the Muslim that Alex was debating, and you can look at these and these other metrics I have saved for the debate I want to have, that Islam just actually lowers the quality of life for people generally. It doesn't actually help. It makes things worse long term. So there is an argument to be made that you could actually say, if you're an atheist, to go, hey, well, I'm going to go against Islam because this is harmful to women and children and men, and we shouldn't want this in society. If you got a religion like Christianity, Sikhism, Buddhism, that you can't see those direct negative metrics, what's the point? But with Islam, you can.
That was the most racist thing I've ever heard in my life.
It sure was. Muslim is a race.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And the thing is, some people point out that Christian countries, that Christianity yields better results. Pretty sure that there are that in the research. I don't know the methodology and everything that is part of it. You have probably read through all of it, so you can probably tell me. But not sure what variables are involved and all of that, but some people will suggest that since Christian societies are generally better, or Christian countries are generally more advanced, of course you will get better results in a Christian society, for example, compared to a Muslim society. People seem to, but here's the thing. Sorry to say this, but Christian countries are generally better because they are Christian countries compared to Muslim countries.
You should read this book, AP. He's going over the question of why didn't Islam give rise to science when they were more advanced 1,000 years ago. And he actually argues Islam used science when it was beneficial for Islam. You develop trigonometry so you know which way to pray to Mecca. But once that's all sorted out, they discarded it because it wasn't useful for Islam. Whereas in Christian societies, they had separation of church and state. They allowed science to develop as its own institution. Bam, you get modern science. So although the Christian societies were lagging a little bit 1,000 years ago, once they took off, they allowed science to become what it is. And Islam was holding it back. In fact, they started burning books in a lot of ways because they started to think, well, this is not helpful for Islam. We should just get rid of it. Not that it was harmful. It just wasn't helpful. Therefore, burn the books.
Well, in Islam, it was all like back in the day. So Islam was expanding and conquering. And as they would expand and conquer, they would come into contact with other people's writings, mathematical writings, and so on, scientific writings. And they would have to Muslims would have to actually go to the caliph and say, hey, can we get permission to look into these writings of the philosophers and so on to see how they can benefit Islam? And they would be given permission. Yes, you can investigate these things to find out how they can benefit Islam. So it was completely pragmatic. If it helps Islam, then we can use it. But if the moment we find out it doesn't, we need to veer away from that stuff. And so Islam would always have these brief periods of philosophy flourishing for a brief time, science flourishing for a brief time, and then Islam would ultimately suffocate it, and it doesn't continue. Whereas in Christianity, the thinking was different. It's not simply how can this benefit Christianity. Their idea was God created the universe, and therefore the universe is rational and intelligible. We're the kinds of things God made us in his image. We're the kinds of things we're the ones who can understand this. A cat can't understand the universe because we're made in God's image. We can understand what he did, but we can only do that by going and investigating and researching. And they actually the pioneers of science viewed it as a form of worship. The more you learn about the universe, the more you're learning about how God is running the universe. And therefore, the more you're kind of like, your mind is like connecting with the Almighty. And so they viewed it as this great thing. But notice there, it's not just how is this benefiting Christianity? It's I'm worshiping the Almighty by figuring out how the laws that he is using to run the universe. And so notice there's no end to that. You just keep going at it. You just keep going at it and learning more and more. And then what's funny is you have not the new atheists, but later you have atheists and so on, who absorbed all those ideas that the universe is intelligible, that we're the kinds of things that can understand the universe, that this kind of knowledge is good. But once again, they threw out the foundation. This actually came up in Jordan Peterson's discussion with Richard Dawkins, when Peterson was describing the foundations of science, and he's saying these were all faith claims in Christianity, that the universe can be understood, that we're the kinds of things that understood it. These were religious claims back then, and they put them into practice and gave rise to the scientific revolution. And Dawkins agreed. He goes, "Oh, Christianity might have played a positive role in the development of science and so on." But Peterson brings it around. He goes, "Haven't you noticed that as people are turning away from that Christian foundation, that people are challenging and complaining about science more?" And so it's actually the reverse of what they thought. Now we can't figure out what a woman is. And now people attack Richard Dawkins based on his claims. Whenever he says, "What are you talking about? This new idea that you just came up with is silly." And they all blast him. And he's pointing out, it's like, hey, when you had this Christian foundation, you were pretty safe at Oxford University doing your science and so on. Now that people are turning away from Christian, have you noticed how much more that it's becoming increasingly difficult to just be a scientist and to go out and do what you want to do? And so, I don't know. You hope that that's something they'll catch on to eventually.
It's also very briefly. Muslim scholars are thought to have contributed very, very much to the end of scientific advancements and research in Islamic history. One of those people, very prominent and actually very relevant to our time right now because of all the Salafis, the Muhammad Hijabs and Al-Dawas and Haqiqat and all the others follow the Salafi, the traditionalist school. Ibn Taymiyyah, he was a very influential scholar who had huge issues with science, logic, and philosophy, and he was basically saying that that our religious society is being brought down with the obsession with science and Greek philosophy and logic and all that, and people keep trying to understand things when everything is very clear in the revelations of Allah and so on. So then you have, on the other hand, people outside that school like Ghazali, who is respected for different reasons. He was also very critical of the supposed overuse of science and all that, and so it was very much Islamic scholars themselves who contributed to the decline of science in the Islamic world, because they thought it doesn't serve the good purpose, which is to be Islamic and to follow Allah, which the purpose was meant to be.
Yeah, it's all covered in Huff's book. He covers a lot of those and points that out. It's very, very interesting. I'm thoroughly enjoying. I read the second edition, so I actually got the third edition just to read it for fun because I thought it.
Yeah, I have to point out, going along with what AP was talking about there. In Islam, it's like, what are you? What are you? Well, you're this ignorant thing until God gives you some revelation, and then you know that. And if you think you can go out and figure this out on your own, you don't understand what you are. You're this completely dumb, ignorant thing who is completely helpless unless the Almighty tells you something in a special revelation. You're wasting your time if you're trying to figure it out. You know exactly what he has told you. That's it. And that's all you know. That's very different from Judaism and Christianity, where you're created in the image of God. And there's a sense in which we are made for this kind of thing. We are made to keep moving forward and to keep progressing and so on, and to keep learning and so on. So you end up with different results. And then you have atheism, which is just you're made to reproduce. And one of the things we like to do is to figure things out. And so, yeah, let's figure things out.
So humanities are the replicators from Stargate. I've not seen that show.
I saw the movie. I saw the original movie. I never saw the show.
Yeah, the old movie was pretty good. I remember that. John the Presbyter. Presbyter? I used to think that atheists had better arguments until I realized I'm not convinced isn't a good argument. Looking at you, Matt Dillahunty.
Matt Dillahunty is actually a perfect example of someone who thinks that this is all like obvious and indisputable. And if you say, you know what, I don't see the foundation for morality. You're just like, there's something wrong with you and you're a monster if you do not take it as self-evidence that all these moral claims are true and somehow scientifically based. But yeah, he's in that camp of he grew up in a society that had been developing for centuries until the point where they have a collection of values, and he thinks it's obvious and self-evident, and this is just how human beings are. He actually thinks that this is how human beings are. The morality of a 21st century sort of enlightened, scientifically minded atheist, though that's just natural human values that we all share and so on. And this is, people don't realize what a huge problem this is. I mean, this is like destroying societies. This idea that, hey, this is how human beings are. We're all like this, and therefore it's no problem if you bring in millions of jihadis into your society. We all have the same values. No, you don't, morons.
Yeah, Islam is more based around values of honor and order and authority. It's more based.
That's where you cut it. Islam is more based. That's the part you cut, ladies and gentlemen.
Got him.
Islam is more based.
I brought this quote up in my debate with Phil Zuckerman, which again I'll post Friday. But he says this: Jean Bottero, in his book "Religion in Ancient Mesopotamia," says this. He said, "Did morality, honest and righteous behavior, have an authentic religion or religious and cultural value, a place in the practice of religion, a direct influence on the gods? We've never found any response in all of our documentation to such a question that we ask ourselves from our own religious and biblical point of view. The ancient Mesopotamians never overtly concerned themselves with or imagined such preoccupations, which are so familiar to us. This must have been one of Moses' greatest revolutions in Israel, to replace the purely material maintenance of the gods with the single and sole liturgical obligation in life to obey a moral law." So the idea of this internal moral law where we value things like mercy and grace and love, this was a Judeo-Christian thing. And this is one of the reasons I don't see why Islam can really be classified as an Abrahamic religion. I get why it is in a sociological sense, but they have a different basis for morality in a lot of ways.
Yes.
It's not Judeo-Christian. And they prize order, loyalty, in-group loyalty, honor far more than truth, love, charity. And this just manifests in the studies we see that I've been saving up. It's just not the same.
That is absolutely true. I also don't understand one thing, which is that if the self-proclaimed secular humanists believe in, for example, evolutionary biology and morality associated with it, I mean, I'm pretty sure I learned that societies are thought to be to develop over centuries, where the religions that they follow, for example, bake into your into those societies the certain moral values, the attitudes, and so on that they end up with. So if Christianity, if religion A teaches kindness and goodness and compassion and understanding and so on, and a society has that religion for centuries, then according to the evolutionary way of thinking, that society would end up adopting such ideas, for example. Whereas if a different society followed belief B, which teaches cruelty and honor and pride and humiliation and all that, they would end up with a completely different set of morals and ideas, and with completely different attitudes, regardless of whether the individuals believe in that religion or not.
Mm-hmm.
So the religion that is part of the society very much contributes to the humans that these people become. It doesn't just happen with, oh, we just grow up and we learn science and we go, we read books and we look at the sky and we look at the universe and we listen to Richard Dawkins, and although Richard Dawkins has kind of become a little bit too fascist right wing because he doesn't agree with some of the things that we say anymore. So now we listen to others, and yeah, we all agree now that we should all be secular humanists who all look out for each other and love each other and all that. That's just not how it works. That's unrealistic.
IP, is The Fate of the Apostles by Sean McDowell accurate source of what happened to the apostles? Yes, I'd highly recommend his book. I think it's pretty good.
That's pretty much like the main source now. I mean, he's the one who actually went through everything and compiled it all. Yeah,
it was a dissertation. So three are truly doing God's work, especially AP. Yeah. Especially AP. The new and new atheism definitely stands for narcissistic evangelical worldview. I got to bookmark that one. State ideology. Cool.
True. I agree.
I'd love for you all to have a panel discussion with Made by Jim Baum and Andrew Wilson. They've been asking YouTube atheists IP's questions for a while. I'm trying to remember who that is.
Andrew Wilson?
Yeah,
he's the guy that that's the guy who made Matt Dillahunty rage quit, right?
Oh yeah, that is him.
Yeah. So that's him. And then the other thing he was famous for was they had a debate on Muhammad's relationship with Aisha, and the Muslims. The Muslims' position was that yes, Muhammad had sex with her when she was 9, but he didn't damage her at all. And so Andrew Wilson argued that the vaginal canal of a 9-year-old is about 2 inches long, and therefore, if Muhammad didn't harm her, then he must have had a 1.8 inch penis at most.
I helped him prepare. I've talked to him before he had the debate because I was like, hey, I see you're gonna have this debate. You want to talk about it? Because it's gonna be on child marriage. He told me that argument beforehand, and I was like, I wish I thought of that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, how did no one think of that? That's what I call mad scientist level.
It makes sense because I posted something earlier on X or Twitter from the book of the famous Imam Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran. You should have a look at that, IP. You would love it. I posted a page of, I'll send it to you. I posted a page from Khomeini's book on morality, on morals, on Islamic law, and he comments on when it is allowed to have intercourse with a girl, and he says intercourse with a woman is not allowed until she attains the age of 9 years. There is, however, no objection in other enjoyments like touching, lasciviously hugging and rubbing the thighs, even with a suckling infant.
Oh my God. Okay, yeah, send me that. That's awful.
And then it goes into what the danger is, and even if the man does a few things and doesn't cause permanent damage, which I don't want to further describe, you can read it, then there is still no big problem. This is all Islamic way of thinking,
One of these days, the Second Amendment is going to get me on that. It's so disgusting. Oh my God. I'm an ex-new atheist. Arrogance is their downfall, for sure.
That's what they do.
Jeremy Mott, happy Veterans Day to all the veterans out there. Caleb says, how will the Salafi birth rate impact affect future Western Europe as a whole? Is this a current preview to future London stand? So I did read a book recently on this. It was Eric Kaufman's book, the book I said earlier on Shall the Religious Inherit the Earth. He says no. He says that he doesn't think that's going to happen. He says based on the general statistics right now in Europe, the people that are having they have high birth rates and they're going to become the highest percentage are the religious fundamentalist Christians. So fundamentalist Lutherans, fundamentalist Calvinists. He says there will be a larger Islamic population there, but he says a lot of the people that go into Europe that come from Muslim countries actually leave. They become secular and they don't continue those large birth rates. So you will have a larger Muslim percentage that we did have in past decades, but he doesn't think it's going to become the overwhelming majority because eventually the Christian religious birth rate is going to pick up and the immigration will decline because of it. So you'll probably eventually see sort of like a three-way split eventually between like secular, Christian, and Islam, kind of like where we're at now. But he says over time, it's going to be the Christians will eventually get hold of it again, as long as they keep having children. So if you're a Christian in Europe, have more babies and you'll be fine. That's what Kaufman's prediction is.
That's what they do.
Mike and David, any chance of another new debate with Alex? Oh, I love. There might be one I have with him on Capturing Christianity. We might go to Britain in, I think, June and do something like that. So we'll see. That might happen.
Alex O'Connor?
Yeah.
I've never debated him, but I would. That'd be fun. Smart guy.
Oh, yeah.
Smart guy. And AP and I have talked about this a lot. Like he's unlike a lot of the other atheists who've been on the internet for a while. He's like a likable guy. Like who says anything bad about Alex O'Connor? You could disagree with something, but you're going to respectfully disagree with him. You're not going to be like, what a scumbag. He comes across as like really nice and sincere guy and serious thinker and one who actually, think of mind. He was just talking about a debate with a Muslim, how it made him rethink his position on something. That's a guy who's like listening to what everyone's saying and thinking about it carefully and so on. So anyway, interesting.
The only person that had a debate with him or an encounter with him and who walked away attacking him and having a fight with him was Mohammed Hijab.
Yeah, Hijab.
Oh yeah, he like clipped that debate with Alex and took things out of context.
Yeah.
Like I saw that. I was like, that's
Shocker.
really dishonest. Yeah. Can we use the moral argument even though we get a lot of our values from the spread of Christianity and it doesn't appear to be intrinsic? So the way I explain this is Christianity helped us discover what objective morality was. Like sort of like how like modern science helped us to discover objective natural laws, Christianity helped us discover what the objective moral laws were. So it's not that you can use both. Just one that helped us get to how we understand objective morality and what it best is.
And I'll just add, when I talked about divine command theory, and that is a view that your moral obligations, the moral obligations you actually have. In other words, do not murder. Those kinds of claims, their ultimate status, what they ultimately are commands of God. Now, for some reason, when atheists hear divine command theory, they think of it like an Islamic view where unless God gives you a written command, you have no idea what to do. That's not. I mean, that it's a form of divine command theory, but it's not what people generally mean, like philosophers generally mean by divine command theory. God can communicate. You can come to know what your moral obligations are in all kinds of ways. And the most common way that you would become aware of your moral obligations is by people telling you. In other words, they get passed down to you. So in other words, it's, at some point, someone had to figure out the Pythagorean theorem. Since then, it just gets passed down. So guess what? It's true. It works. There's something real and true about it. It's mathematically true. How do you find out about it? Well, someone told your teacher told you it. You didn't have to sit there and figure it out for yourself. So you can still believe that you have all these moral obligations and that you have them from the spread of Christianity, because Christianity spread these values while simultaneously arguing that the real status of what these things are, their ontological status, is their ultimately commands of God. So yeah. So the point here is, it doesn't matter how you arrive at them, whether you heard it from your parents, you heard it from society, you recognized it from a YouTube video, you read it in a book. It's not how you got it. It's what it is. What is the ultimate status of this thing? And so the divine command theory would be something along the lines of, it's actually similar to something like mathematics or something, and that someone can eventually figure it out. But what they're figuring out is something that's true. They didn't make it up. When you came up with the Pythagorean theorem, you weren't making it up and then you duped everyone into believing. You were actually figuring out triangles. You're coming to understand triangles. And so you have your moral obligations, and however someone figured those out, they are actually commands of God. They get communicated to you just because human beings, we pass on knowledge.
David disappears. Well, Wisconsin has its gangsters. I'm not sure what that's in reference to.
Islam has its gangsters.
I want to say one thing, which is related to the question that just came up, although it's not directly an answer to the question or even related to the topic of the question, but kind of goes into the direction, which is that you don't even have to apply Christian morality differently or to speak of it in a positive way without necessarily using it as an argument for the truth of Christianity. You don't necessarily have to accept or believe that Christianity is in all of its truth claims absolutely true in order to recognize that the Christian way of the Christian morality, Christian way of living and thinking is quite good, in terms of contributing to human flourishing, creating better societies, more functional societies, and so on. You can totally be you can totally have a non-theistic or non-Christian worldview when it comes to metaphysics, when it comes to theology and all that, and still acknowledge that Christianity makes for a quite good way of living.
Right. Whoever said IP is a closeted Roman Catholic is not paying attention. He's a monarchical Trinitarian. Eastern Orthodoxy is much more likely, if not obvious. Insert David saying, you see?
Unless he's only defending a particular view of the Trinity to more deeply closet himself as a Catholic and make it less obvious.
It's part of my evil plan. Sam Shamoon is convinced I'm a Catholic. Convinced. And I'm just like, all right, I can neither confirm nor deny the reports as of now. So but yeah, I get emails all the time. I know you're Orthodox, or I know you're Protestant. I know you're Catholic. Some people became atheists for the wrong reason. Could it be that those atheists who call atheism new? Atheism has been around for a long, long time. Well, new atheism, again, is a specific idea that not only is religion wrong, respect for religion is also wrong. So that's why it was called new atheism, and that it was a
it was new. We're not going to take it anymore. Atheists in the past, they took it. We're not taking it anymore.
To clarify my last question, if you said atheists can't trust their cognitive faculties, they can't understand complex theories like naturalism. That's from the earlier question about your video on Richard Dawkins.
Okay. Yeah, well, the idea is not the theory that's the problem. And I'm not even talking about whether naturalism is a complex theory. The point is your brain just wasn't made to understand things like the origin of the universe or something like that.
He said your brain wasn't made.
It wasn't made for those kinds of things if naturalism is true. So anyways, just use Darwin's example, which I quoted in the video. When Darwin said someone sent him a book on design and nature, and Darwin said, I agree completely. This doesn't look like chance. It doesn't look like chance. He says, but with me, the horrid doubt always arises whether a man's conviction, the convictions of my mind, are of any value. More so, would we trust the convictions of a monkey's mind? In other words, you say, okay, we have cognitive faculties. We got them because they helped our ancestors survive and reproduce. Guess what? That's the same way a monkey got its cognitive faculties. It's the same way a rat got its cognitive faculties. We have more developed cognitive faculties, but the mental abilities that a rat has, it got them by the same process that we got ours, right? So you say we're smarter, we have an advantage, we learned better But how do you get to the idea that we can therefore trust those faculties, trust our cognitive faculties with questions of ethics, objective morality, the origin of the universe, or where the universe is headed? You don't get that. And you even saw Dawkins using this. You can't trust your cognitive faculties when you're talking about things like the origin of the universe. We weren't made. What did he say? He said we got our cognitive faculties because they helped us on the African plain. That's where we got them. They helped us survive and reproduce. So you can't. It's when you talk about naturalism is a claim that the natural world is all that exists. Okay, why would you trust your cognitive faculties to give you the truth about a statement like that? Right? The natural world is all that exists. So there's nothing beyond that. How in the name of common sense could you take your brain seriously when it tells you that, when you're basically a more advanced primate? You're a more advanced primate than other primates. So that's the problem. And really the real takeaway, ladies and gentlemen, is when naturalists, people who say that they're naturalists, when naturalists take their cognitive faculties extremely seriously and believe in all these moral laws, moral obligations. They might say they don't, but then they turn around, they start judging everyone according to these moral values that they take extremely seriously. And when they trust in mathematics, and when they trust in science, and they trust their brains to be figuring out the entire universe, it's almost like deep down you don't really take your own worldview that seriously. You don't take your worldview as seriously as you do. You think, in other words, deep down you apparently believe that you are something much more than your worldview says you are. And that's kind of the real takeaway. So guess what? It's like, hey, atheist, I agree with you. This is right. That's wrong. This is better than that thing. I agree with you. We are meant to discover the universe and do science and figure out the origin. I agree with you on all of that. It just makes zero sense on your worldview, and it makes perfect sense on mine. So it's almost like deep down you really believe something other than what you're saying you believe. So that's kind of the real takeaway.
Atheists will come around to spirituality, but they will be seduced by Gnosticism so they can retain their leftover Yahweh's evil childishness. Maybe that'd be interesting if Gnosticism came back. It'd be very interesting. Which version of Gnosticism too? Like
a demiurge idea. Somebody was saying it earlier in the chat. I don't know if they were joking or serious. They were suggesting that there are two gods in the Bible.
Yeah. Just promoting God loves Mormons until you destroy Mormonism. Also, Aaron's opening statement was so bad in your debate, I couldn't take him seriously. Yeah, I've heard a lot from my debate with Aaron Ra about how that was sort of like the end of his career. I mean, obviously he's still on YouTube, but people like really, I know one guy, that was his first step towards Christianity. Like he said that debate, he was an atheist before that debate. After the debate, he started questioning everything and he eventually became a Christian because that debate Aaron just did so bad in it. And so, yeah, that was one of my favorite debates I've done of all time. I thought it was very effective in getting the message out for sure. Thank you for the super chat. What is the evidence that convinced you that space-time has an absolute beginning? So classical space-time has an absolute beginning because of things like the cosmic microwave background radiation, and the Borg-Guth-Vilenkin theorem shows that classical space-time has to have a beginning. It cannot be infinitely in the past. You can have a universe that is quantum, and time then gets a little different there. But I mean, I don't think that's incompatible with theism. But classical space-time has to have a beginning because of the Borg-Guth-Vilenkin theorem. Many new atheists are going to cry out to Jesus for mercy just before they die and go to heaven, being unsure they are correct, while those who listen to them will not and be lost. I mean, I hope everyone cries out. I don't care when they do it. I just prefer it happens. I mean, the more the merrier. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing if people cry out. So hopefully those who listen to them also do the same thing. On New Atheism, did you guys ever run into free thought blogs and Atheism Plus branches, mega synthesis of PC stuff? Yeah, I remember Atheism Plus. That was like Richard Carrier's idea, and it was just like, it was Atheism Plus basically American leftist policies, and it didn't really go anywhere. People were sort of like, nah, this is not happening, and some of the right-leaning atheists really did not like it and criticized it, so it just collapsed in on itself. I don't know about. I don't remember the free thought blogs.
That sounds like a very stupid idea.
It sounds like a dumb app, is what it is. It sounds like some stupid app that Apple came out with. Atheism
We're
Plus.
the free thinkers. They tell us we're smart if we just mindlessly agree with them and we play skeptics. That makes us free.
I think Atheism Plus was sort of that attempt to make atheism more than just attacking other worldviews, actually have a foundation. But it was just politics. It was just political theory, one political theory. Plus
Subscribe to Atheism Plus for $19.99 a month to watch all our shows live on demand.
Yeah. And that's why it never took off. I think most people are very unclear about Islam. They think it's Christianity, but with falafel. Yeah, that's true. They think it is like just a Middle Eastern version of Christianity, and it isn't. The value system, its ethical system, is completely different. It's not Judeo-Christian in its value system. It's again, it prizes honor more than charity. It's going to prize order far more than love. It's going to sacrifice truth on the altar of in-group loyalty. And I see Muslims do this all the time. They just cheer their other Muslims on when they're making incredibly dumb arguments. See the stream I did with Testify back on Thursday. We responded to Bobby Perspective. He had horrible arguments, and in the comments were all just cheering him on with these circular arguments. And it was just like, dude, like no one's going to correct him on this horrible stuff.
Yeah, and I'll give two quick examples to confirm that what you're saying right now goes all the way back to the foundations of Islam, that it has always, so it's something that is very different from its beginnings. But when you got to the time of the third of the rightly guided caliph, so that's Caliph Uthman, it came up that there were that Muslims in different areas were reciting the Quran differently. They were coming up with basically different versions of the Quran. Keep in mind, it's still the Quran, but you had lots of textual variants and so on. And so people were reciting the Quran differently. He ordered that his solution was to order everyone to hand over their Qurans, burned them all, and then issued a standardized version. Now, keep in mind, from the perspective of a textual critic, you would want all those manuscripts, and you could take those Qurans and actually examine them and come up with what would most likely be the correct reading. In Islam, it was burn it all, issue an authoritative standardized version, and that's more important. What's more important is the unity. It doesn't matter. Keep in mind, if you're saying, hey, one of Muhammad's top Quran reciters, he said the Quran only is supposed to have 111 chapters, and another one of Muhammad's top Quran citers said there are 116 chapters, and so on. So you have these different kinds of agreements. Guess what? Someone's right and someone's wrong there. In Islam, it's enough of this. Burn it all. Have an authoritative version. So it doesn't matter what the truth is. It's the unity of the ummah was of more importance. And then if you go back, you have things like the story of Mu'ayisa and Hu'ayisa. These were these two brothers, and one of them converted to Islam. And then right after converting to Islam, Muhammad says, kill any Jew who falls into your power. So he runs out and kills a Jew. And his brother said, what are you doing killing that guy that we had business relations with? He's the source of much of our income. And the brother says, if the one who commanded me to kill that Jew commanded me to kill you, I'd kill you too. And then the brother converts to Islam too. And he says, anything that could convince you of this must be great. Well, what's all that? They're not looking at, hey, what are your arguments and evidence? It's whatever sends you into a homicidal rage and makes you want to go out and killing people, that must be true. Why? Well, if you're willing to go out and kill for it, you must really know what you're talking about. And that's why in Islam, it's all more about chest thumping and posturing. And look, we will conquer the world and stuff. It's more about that. And so it's not who has the best arguments. It's what makes you violent and so on. So guys, this is like very, very different from our way of thinking. That was built into Islam from the first generation.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to very briefly say, without dragging this too much, I talked about this yesterday or so. Lots of people, even from within the Jewish or Christian worldview, have this idea that Islam kind of came out of the same family. It just did not. It is completely foreign to the culture. It is completely foreign to to Jerusalem, to Israel, to the land, to the Holy Land, to Judaism, to Jewishness, to Christianity, and so on. It is foreign to all of this. It came out of a polytheistic, pagan, Arab environment and family through Muhammad adopting ideas of Christians and Jews because he admired Christians and Jews and thought he could win them over, but they didn't like him, so he ended up hating them instead. It's not the same family. Christianity came out of Judaism. The earliest Christians were called Jews; they weren't called Christians. It is basically the same family that develops. Islam is not like that. Islam came from very, very far away, very far away.
I feel like calling Islam a religion is a bit of a stretch. They behave more like a political movement with the trappings of a religion. Yeah, it's far more political because of the Sharia, and then like Christianity.
It's a political religion. And for anyone who doesn't understand the real difference there, it's normally you become a part of some religion, and there are sets of rules as part of that religion, and those rules apply to people who have subscribed to that religion. In Islam, there are rules for the believers and rules for the unbelievers. And the unbelievers have to be subjugated to impose the rules on them. And they're not even the same rules. Some of the rules are the same, but other rules, there are special rules for the unbelievers that have to be imposed on them by force. And so the goal of Islam is to subjugate the entire world under the authority of the Muslim caliph.
Marx derided earlier socialism as utopian, even though his version was more idealistic. New atheism is mostly religious challenges from 1,000 years ago.
That's what they do.
Mm-hmm. To defeat Gnosticism, it only preaches transcendence. This is anti-biblical because God is clearly also immanent. Without immanence, Christianity becomes an actual death cult the atheists accuse us of. Yeah, this is one of the things that Phil Zuckerman keeps trying to argue, is that Christianity only prizes the afterlife, and secularism prizes the here and now, which is false, because Christianity is about the resurrection. It's about turning this world into the new heaven and the new earth. So it's about, let's start building this now. That's why the Great Commission is important, because it's about building the kingdom of God here on earth, so that when Christ returns, he returns to his actual kingdom, it's not about just escaping the earth. It's about transforming the earth. This is what Romans 8 is about, for example. So that's just, some people today confuse Christianity with Gnostic ideas, unfortunately.
Oppenheimer Oppenheimer, the guy who helped build the nuclear bomb and so on. So he was an atheist he became interested in Near Eastern and in Eastern religions later in life, but he wasn't a Christian. But when he discussed why the scientific revolution occurred in Christian Europe, he explained, he said, it seems that Christianity just has an idea of progress built into it. And basically before Christianity, the goal of a culture was to provide stability to an area, right? It's your culture and your values are meant to preserve and sustain and keep things from changing, right? And Christianity came along and said, no, we want to actually change things and make them better. We want to keep improving. What's wrong? What's wrong with the world? Let's keep improving it. And so they're constantly trying to figure out how to fix problems in society and so on. And he thought that that eventually gets you to the scientific revolution, like trying to figure out the universe to improve it.
Yeah, in the ancient Near East, time was not viewed as progressive. It was cyclical. The past was always more idealized, and we were deteriorating further away from it. So they didn't have this idea of progress. Christianity really did give an idea of progress that wasn't inherent in the ancient cultures. Was Averroes' contribution to philosophy overstated? I don't remember who that is. I think it's an Andalusian Islamic philosopher.
Yeah,
Averroes. That's Ibn Rushd, I think is his other name.
Yeah, Ibn Rushd.
Oh, okay.
But he's a Muslim philosopher. I have to say, I think, as far as their impact, you did have Avicenna, Averroes, Al-Ghazali. They were philosophers, and they did have an impact. I do think that they're overstated just because it's like this when people talk about science in the Muslim world, they tend to overstate things and their significance just to kind of give Muslims something to feel good about. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you had all kinds of people doing algebra before Al-Jabr. But Muslims will, and we invented algebra. No, they were doing algebra before you. He made improvements on it and so on. But there's this tendency to, anytime you find a Muslim intellectual and stuff, to kind of look at this great contribution and so on. Again, they are making contributions, but people put more emphasis on them just to kind of make Muslims feel better about their history.
New atheists are not always very clever, like they were trained to swim when babies, but then believe it can happen by itself, not training their children, watching them drown, and blame social media. Well, a lot of them don't even have children. The birth rates among atheists are abysmally low. I mean, like you'll often find Christian families that have 5 or more children. How many atheist families do you find with that? Very few, if at all. So yeah, it's just they mostly don't have children, but they don't train their children with the same values they were raised with, unfortunately. Some of them still do a little bit, but not as to the extent.
But doesn't the atheist Bible say, be fruitful and multiply?
No, it says stop because we're going to overpopulate the world. So they stop.
Oh, okay.
From one Mike to another, being named Mike really leaves you no choice except to be base. Yes, being named Michael after the archangel is pretty based. John the Press Spider is back. He says, I remember on Joe Rogan, Graham Hancock said Christians have a lot to answer for because they destroy the Aztec culture. Not sure how destroying a human sacrifice cult is a bad thing, but what would I know? Yeah, some of it was really bad. Like they had one god who had to have children sacrificed to it, but sacrifice of blood and tears. So they would torture these children before killing them because it had to have a sacrifice of blood and tears. So it was pretty evil if you think about it.
That's basically the gist of the movie Apocalypto,
which was a very big movie.
And it's not like they was mostly wiped out by Christians. A lot of it was just disease, just spreading smallpox accidentally throughout the New World killed most Native Americans.
Yeah, much of it was getting in contact with a disease for which they have no immunity and no protection and so on, and being basically wiped out by that, which is not funny. It's not funny at all. However,
Thank you for telling us it's not funny, AP.
You're welcome. I do think that it is kind of it has a cultural. It's like going into a museum and finding out that the museum is now devoid of a certain aspect because it has been destroyed. You know, just like that. It's probably sad that that certain cultures, even those that practice human sacrifice, were wiped out. You know, Don't take me seriously. I just wanted to say something.
We would never.
Super chat from an atheist who sometimes tunes into the channel. He says, why did God harm everyone around David, but not him? David went to prison.
What do you mean? Which?
Yeah, and like harm everyone. I mean, most of the harm, not all of it, but most of the harm I would to the people around me, I would attribute to their bad choices. Bad life choices, like getting addicted to drugs and things like that. It wouldn't occur to me to say, God, why did you put that needle in my mother's arm so many times?
What is this actually talking about? King David.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Off topic, can IP explain Lord apologetics? Yeah, it's an argument I've used before. So Jesus says in a couple places that he's called Lord. And the only time you ever see this phrase in Greek, it's either referring to Yahweh or Jesus. It's never referred to any other being in any Greek text from before Jesus' time, during his time, or after until like very recently. Does anyone ever call anyone Lord except Jesus and Yahweh? And so this is an argument I've used to basically say, this is not an argument. I made it up. It comes from scholars that this is Jesus basically saying he is Yahweh. There's no way around it when you look at it, how that phrase is used in the Greek Septuagint and other texts. So yeah, that's how I'd briefly cover it. Say we granted that Rebecca was 3 years old. Islam would have 2 PDF prophets, yay or nay, to use in apologetics. Yeah, pretty much, because they have something we don't have, which is like the protection of the prophets from major sin. We don't have that in Christianity. We think that the prophets did commit horrible sins at times because they were imperfect, and this was the necessity of Christ's sacrifice because the prophets were also sinful. It's a problem for Islam, not for us. So if they're right, it's just more problems for them, not us.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, we point out, and the reason it became common to point out Muhammad's relationship with Aisha, now people would use it to kind of be a warning against the spread of Islam. Hey, you have a bunch of these guys and they really believe in child marriage because of their prophet and so on. The reason we started sharing that way back in the early 2000s was one of the most common arguments back then was that Muhammad must be a true prophet because his character was so amazing. And so they made all these arguments about how this guy is massively superior. I want to sit there and make a video just going through some of the books from that time that were Muslim apologetics books. And it's just page after page after page saying that Muhammad is like a diamond in a heap of just garbage rocks and so on, and he stands so far above all men of all different periods that they all appear as mere dwarfs next to him. They're including other prophets and stuff like that. Muhammad is that superior to everyone else, but they're talking about how his character was so superior. And they would say that when Muhammad delivered his revelations, the pagans would have to cover their ears running because they knew that if his words actually got into their heads, they would convert to Islam. And so it was absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, they had this common argument. Muhammad's character is so great that he must be a true prophet. So when they started using that, we started responding, okay, well, what about all these other things? What about him having sex with a 9-year-old girl? And then they tried, at first it was, they denied it. You're lying. And then, so we kept sharing the sources we kept showing people in the hadith. And then their argument became, okay, yes, there's a hadith that says she was 9, but there are all these other hadiths that say she was older. And they spread that for a while. And then we had to keep challenging them on it, Show us one. You were there at the debate, IP, when Kenny was saying that, but there are these other sources. Yeah. I said, show me one. Show me one that says she was older. Show me one source. He could never show actually one. So anyway, we did that for years. And then they had to kind of finally agree, okay, Muhammad did have sex with a 9-year-old girl, according to our most trusted sources. But then they had to start saying, but Mary was only 12, according to the Catholic Encyclopedia, even though it's not what the Catholic Encyclopedia says. They knew that most people didn't know what's in the Catholic Encyclopedia, so they're able to lie. And they started arguing that Rebecca was 3 based on the stupidest reading of the text you could come up with. And so how do you then deal with it? Normally you'd say, show me she was 3, do the math. And there's a step that they always have to lie about. It's at the end of Genesis 22. They have to say that the end of that is saying something that it is clearly not saying, and you would never read it as such. But anyway, they have to do these gymnastics to get to Rebecca was 3 years old when Isaac consummated the marriage with her. They do that to say, well, Muhammad is not all that bad if Isaac himself had sex with a 3-year-old. And as IP was pointing out, we don't have the same view of prophets. So if we were to find out, it's not the case, but if we were to find out that Isaac had sex with a 3-year-old, we would say, shame on Isaac, that was bad. In Islam, you can't do that. In Islam, you can't do that. They believe in Allah's protection of the prophets. He's going to protect a true prophet from persisting in any sort of major error. And therefore, from their perspective, if Isaac had sex with a 3-year-old, that would be God's stamp of approval on having sex with 3-year-olds. Whereas from our perspective, if Isaac had sex with a 3-year-old, we would condemn Isaac because we don't believe that prophets are protected from committing major errors. And therefore, yes, if someone wanted to argue it, you'd say, well, that's a problem for Islam because you have a view that would be good, that would be good and acceptable and model behavior. We don't. When a prophet sins, we condemn the sin, and so does the Bible.
I would just point out also that there's nothing wrong with with Rebecca being 3 years old, because everyone who gets past the age of 3 was 3 years old.
Powerful.
IP is John 8:1-11 biblical. I think that's the story about the woman caught in adultery, and I think that's not original to the Gospel of John, from what I can remember.
Yeah, and the claim there, and you do have disagreements. You have people who you have a couple different options there. You have one that there were possibly multiple editions of John, right? Even put out by the original John and his original followers and stuff like that. Like maybe they had an expanded edition and so on. But the claim is not that the story is false. The claim is that it was not originally there in the Gospel of John. Like there's even a manuscript where it's in the Gospel of Luke. And so the idea is people put out the Gospels. And the main idea, as far as I know, as far as apart from thinking that it's original, the main idea would be that you had the Gospels, people wrote the Gospels, but there's this story that people are like, come on, how is no one including this awesome story? And so people are like, okay, well, we'll insert it right here in the Gospel of John. So the claim is not that the story is false. The claim is that the story was not originally in the Gospel of John and was put in there by someone who's like, we can't leave this story out. It's too important.
Right. IP, please read Night in Gethsemane by Miss Masmo. Don't know how to say that. I can't explain it. Just how amazing it is. Please trust me. It's a short read. All right, I will try to check it out. Night in Gethsemane by Masmo.
Is it better than Twilight?
Oh,
No, I don't know.
Nothing's better than Twilight, AP.
Yeah.
Last night I witnessed on an Islam channel, most embraced a trans woman that was saved by Christian faith in shelter and food, reject hypocrisy in their mind of Christianity. It hurt me to see this. I'm not sure if I understand this comment entirely. I think there's some words missing in the sentence that you're trying to articulate what you're trying to say. So I'm not sure I entirely follow, but I appreciate the super chat. I call it David's wager. If naturalism is true, you're not rational for believing it. If false, you're irrational. But if you don't believe, you're rational for disbelieving in it. What do you think of that, David?
If naturalism is true, you're not rational for believing it. Yes, because if naturalism is true, you cannot trust the cognitive faculties that would be required for affirming that naturalism is true. In other words, if it were true, you just couldn't trust your mental abilities to get you to the truth of it. If false, so if naturalism is false, you're irrational. Okay. So if naturalism is true and you believe that naturalism is true, you're not rational for believing it because according to naturalism, you shouldn't trust the cognitive faculties required to affirm it. But if you believe in naturalism and naturalism is false, you're irrational anyway, because you're believing in this global theory that is not true. So, but if you don't believe it, if you don't believe in naturalism, you're rational for disbelieving it. Yes, it wouldn't mean you're rational for believing some alternative. And so, in other words, if you took naturalism seriously, the correct takeaway would be, I don't know because I'm not made for this kind of stuff. We're not made. And this is something similar to Hume said. When Hume says, when you start, in Hume, keep in mind, Hume is before Darwin. So Hume's view is Hume is a legitimate skeptic. He's not like he's not like people who claim to be skeptics, but all they really mean by skeptic is everything I disagree with, I'm going to play skeptic and I'm going to believe all these things that make no sense, but I'm going to say I'm being a skeptic. Hume's view is there's certain things in our immediate context that we're kind of made for. Once you start talking about the eternities and infinity and all these kinds of things, we have gotten way beyond what our faculties are for. And so the position is not, hey, I'm adopting, if naturalism is true, I'm rational for adopting some alternative to it. It's just, you would be rational for saying, hey, if naturalism is true, I have no way of knowing that it's true because I'm not made for that kind of thing. That would be rational. In other words, I cannot affirm it. So not affirming naturalism, even if whether it's true or false, not affirming naturalism is rational.
Mm-hmm. Capturing Christianity says, how do you guys interpret Surah 575? Please read and give your interpretations. I'm making a video on how it alone refutes Islam. Let me put that on the screen because I got it up here.
Yeah, I don't know. This is the verse about not eating food. I think it's pretty straightforward, but I think Cameron is doing like a deeper dive, because I just read it as like what it's obviously saying, and it's pretty straightforward, but I think he's doing a deeper dive onto it. So I just go with the simple. So the Messiah, son of Mary, was no more than a messenger. That's pretty straightforward. You even have you have the same thing with Muhammad. Muhammad's no more than a messenger, and so on. Many messengers had come and gone before him. His mother was a woman of truth. They both ate food. See how we made the signs clear to them, yet see how they are deluded from the truth. So the normal, straightforward way of interpreting this is as a response to people who, one, believe that Jesus is divine, but two, the Quran is apparently responding to people who believed in the deity of Mary. And later in the same chapter, verse 116, you even have that Mary is apparently included in the Trinity. But as the refutation, they're not divine because they both ate food. And so you're kind of ignoring the idea of the incarnation with this. But again, so that's like the straightforward interpretation of 575. Again, I'm guessing that Cameron is doing a deeper dive. I'm trying to think where you could be going. You know, you could make an argument that if Allah, the creator of the universe, thinks that they both ate food is a response to Christian belief in the deity of Christ, then Allah has no clue what he's talking about, because we believe in the incarnation. He took on a human nature. So you could argue like that, or you could go along the lines of responding to the idea that Mary is somehow not human or something like that. I don't know who in the world believes that, so I don't know what Allah's responding to here. But again, yeah, so I don't know what deeper level Cameron wants to go with this. I see some possibilities, but yeah, that's the verse.
Yeah, I kind of agree with David on that. So it'd be interesting to see what you got. So hopefully that'll come out soon. That looks interesting. Edward, atheist, says, I've been studying Exodus 22:29 and I'm conflicted. Did Yahweh ask for child sacrifice? My study says yes. I did watch your recent stream, by the way. So Joel Korecko will be back on my channel in the future to address criticisms of that. And basically, it's not God commanding child sacrifice. That's to force that into the text. It's not the simplest reading. It's going to overcomplicate things. There can be a lot of problems with that. It's far more likely he's just talking about service in the temple or in the tabernacle. That's going to be the simplest reading. It's not.
And that would be the most coherent, because you have, I mean, that was one of the main things that the pagans, the Canaanites, were condemned for, was child sacrifice. So it would be really weird to interpret this verse as somehow promoting child sacrifice after one of your biggest criticisms of the Canaanites is that they have child sacrifice.
And source critics will assign this to E, and also in E is Exodus 13, where it clarifies that when you give your firstborn sons, it's for service. And they want to just say it's in an earlier layer of E, but then we're overcomplicating things. We're multiplying layers beyond necessity. And so for source critics, their entire view just violates Occam's razor here. If it's part of the E source, why are we positing these multiple layers? This one has to be earlier so that you can say that it was being corrected by later texts. It's a violation of Occam's razor in so many ways. So yeah, I don't think it works. Which was better preserved, the Bible or the Quran? I think that's not a good comparison, because the Bible is a collection of books and the Quran is just the sayings of Muhammad. It'd be better to ask what is better preserved, like John or the Quran, or like Mark in the Quran, than just the entire Bible, which is multiple books.
For the record, I think that both have been very well preserved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Naturally, the reason you ended up with disagreements about that was the Dawa guys started to lie, because this ties into what we were saying earlier, that truth is not the most important thing. What's the most important thing is promoting and expanding Islam. And so if you have to lie to promote and expand Islam, if you have to make up arguments about scientific miracles and miraculous preservation of the Quran and so on, then as long as you're doing that for Islam, it's actually good. It's actually good and fine. And so that's how you ended up with all these comparisons. But so one, you can, I mean, the New Testament's the best preserved book of the ancient world. The Quran, very well preserved, but for Muslims who complain about the preservation of the Bible and attack it, they have this other issue, namely the Quran affirms the preservation of the earlier scriptures. And so any problem that a Muslim has with the preservation of the Bible is actually a simultaneously an independent problem for the Quran, because the Quran says that Allah is the one who's protecting the books.
Naturalism would entail predetermination. The universe would just be a long chain of reaction, so it couldn't account for knowledge itself. Am I right? Yeah, and I would also argue that relates to consciousness as well and other mental faculties. These are very hard to explain coming out of a naturalistic worldview, which is why we have the hard problem of consciousness and related problems.
Yeah, and that's actually connected to, it's different from the evolutionary argument against naturalism, but it's connected in the sense that if the natural world is all that exists, all you have is particles in motion, and those particles in motion obey laws of nature. And so the idea is every belief in your head was determined before you were ever born. Every belief that you hold right now you got that by particles in motion. It's a fancy array of falling dominoes. How did you arrive at your belief? Particles in motion determined me to have this. Every belief I have is determined. You can change it, but if you change it eventually, you were determined to eventually change your belief. So if you have things in the past, things that happened in the past, and then you have the laws of nature. So in other words, if you go back before we were born, if you go back to the year before you were born, the universe is filled with particles. Those particles are obeying laws of nature. And how do you get to if you have a true belief, how did you get the true belief? Well, not because you're brilliant or something like that. You were just determined to have that true belief. If you have a false belief, how did you get the false belief? Well, the same process, the same fancy array of falling dominoes that gave one person a true belief, gave another person a false belief. And therefore, how do you trust your beliefs, right? The exact same process that produces a true belief produces a false belief. So if I'm determined to believe something true and you're determined to believe something false, it's just this weird situation of the beliefs that we hold, we didn't get to them by being rational or something like that. We got to them straightforward, mindless cause and effect producing them. And that's just, it's weird. It's another situation where if you're an atheist and you're saying, here's my evidence and here are my arguments and so on, it's once again, it's like, okay, how did you arrive at your belief in atheism? If your belief in naturalism is true, how did you get your belief in atheism? You were determined to believe that by mindless particles in motion, obeying laws of nature. How do you take your belief seriously? How do you actually do that? And so in the fact that you take your reasoning process as something more than particles in motion, again, it suggests that you think you're something more than your worldview says you are.
Allah made it appear like Lord was there in the text. Yes, it was all part of, he is the best of deceivers. It was part of his genius plan.
You see?
800 Spanish and thousands of natives defeated the Aztecs. Yeah, there were a lot of tribes that did not like the Aztecs because they kept killing them and using them for sacrifice. So there were a lot of native or first peoples that did join with the Spanish.
That's why they were called the Aztecs.
The what? I don't get it. IP, you should do a live stream debunking Dr. Stephen Nemes' objections to the Trinity. I just saw him spreading heresy on what your pastor didn't tell you's channel. I think it would be interesting. Yeah, I'll look at it. I've not taken a look at that. There's a lot of misconceptions about the Trinity spread.
Hey, IP, you got some pretty based shelves behind you.
Sure do. Filled them up. I got more I'm going to do the bottom shelf next.
That cost you some serious money having someone build those for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I paid someone to come do it because I wanted them to look nice. So I just paid someone.
Mm-hmm. I know the feeling.
Nice.
Except I built mine.
Oh, aren't you special? That's why they don't look as cool as mine.
I don't know, man. I made slots for paintings and everything, man.
I don't have.
Don't make me insult your shelves, man. I paid you a compliment, and then you have to start insulting.
Why did God punish people around King David and not him? He allowed his concubines.
King David. Okay.
Yeah.
He went to prison. He stayed there for quite a while.
I would say, first of all, we don't know the full context. I mean, the Bible does not give us full details on these things about the people involved and what was going on, as well as relations to the afterlife, these kinds of things. So there's a lot more.
Also keep it. What do you mean God didn't punish King David?
He did a lot.
He suffered.
Yeah. Oh, suffered horribly. I mean, horribly. And it was all along. I mean, before he becomes king, he has to spend years hiding and stuff like that because Saul wants him dead and so on. Then he becomes king. Then it goes to his head. But Edward, one thing that's happened in recent centuries is we become so individualistic that we think of each person as this completely, isolated thing. And that's not, you do something wrong, it is affecting everyone around you. It's affecting everyone around you. You do things, it's affecting future generations and so on. So, I mean, I don't know what you're talking about, God not punishing King David. And what do you mean? God, he allowed his concubines to be raped? Yeah, God allows all sorts of things, right? Like I could do stuff right now that would cause all sorts of problems for all kinds of people. If you have a problem with that, you're basically saying, why does God allow us to make choices and decisions for ourselves? Why does he treat us like we're the ones who are supposed to be doing anything? And Edward, I have to say, you have kind of an Islamic view. This sort of we're just passive, and just God has to sit there and do everything for us and so on. And that's not what you are. According to the Bible, that's not what you are. You're the image of God. You're supposed to be doing things, and you have a ton of responsibility in this world. And your bad decisions will screw things up for you and for everyone around you. It can. That happens. And your good decisions actually impact the world. But you're not just this sort of look me, I'm doing all these messed up things and banging this and getting this guy killed, and then bad things happen. Why did God allow all these bad things to happen after all my horrible decisions? Really? That's your question.
Jay Smith makes
your child dying is probably considered a very, very, very horrible thing, unless you think it doesn't really matter, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jay Smith makes a compelling case. The 3 of the 4 mentions of Muhammad in the Quran are about Jesus and the historical Muhammad who stole this Semitic title. Yeah, he doesn't believe Muhammad even existed.
Yeah, so he thinks those are references to Jesus. That's a title, meaning the praised one.
Yeah. How would or do you address the logical positivism and the demarcation problem by Karl Popper? Isn't that the idea that it's hard to distinguish between where science and non-science ends? I believe that is. I think that is a difficult problem because a lot of the stuff we label as science are going to blend with philosophy. And so when it comes to philosophy of science, I would rely on the work of Emery Lakatos more. And I think there's just no way to really distinguish science from philosophy in a lot of ways, because it relies on scientific methodology, which is philosophical by nature. So I don't know how we would solve that. I don't know if it can be entirely. How do you show the Trinity in the Old Testament? What are the best verses? Also, is the Trinity essential to being a Christian? It's absolutely essential to being a Christian. Anyone who denies it is not a Christian. And you just go to the passages in the Old Testament like Exodus 3 or the angel appearing to Hagar, where the angel says, like when it appears to Moses in the burning bush, that the angel is Yahweh. So how does Yahweh be in heaven and also send Yahweh himself? Well, Michael Heiser talks about this, the view that God was a multi-personal being who could send himself to act upon himself who was in heaven. See this in places like Genesis 19, Yahweh rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah from earth and from heaven. So there's 2 Yahwehs in that verse who are raining down on Sodom and Gomorrah. So you see this multi-personal aspect. And even the scholar Benjamin Sommers, who's Jewish, admits Trinitarianism is not incompatible with the Old Testament because the Old Testament shows a multi-personal being.
Yeah, and Anthony Rogers has a bunch of good stuff on this. But yeah, you end up with some really confusing passages in the Old Testament, especially like in the prophets and so on, where they'll be talking about God doing something and sending God, Yahweh sending Yahweh and so on, things like that. And you just look at that and say, if Unitarianism is true, this isn't making a lot of sense there. But Anthony actually goes into like the Targums and so on to show how Jewish rabbis and so on were understanding passages over the time. And what you have is during the first century, if you said there's God and there's the Spirit of God and there's the Word of God, and in the beginning was the Word and the Word was with God and the Word was God, that wouldn't have been a source of confrontation. It was very, very normal back then to believe that there is some sort of plurality within the nature of God. It's as Christianity became a separate thing and started to be in conflict with Judaism that the Jewish rabbis eventually steered towards Unitarianism. But as far as how they were interpreting the text along the way, it was Jewish rabbis who were pointing out what they call the two powers in heaven and so on, that there's something else going on. There's some sort of plurality within the nature of God. And again, in the Targums, you have God, you have the Spirit of God, and then you have the Memra, the Word of God. And they were treating these as somehow sort of different aspects of God or something like that. So yeah, the point is there's a lot to go into there for people who are interested.
I saw you recently use Occam's razor in a video. How would you know when and how to apply it, as you did 2 days ago? Experience will help you. The more you study it and see it in real life, the more you'll know when to apply it. So the best way to explain it is you want an explanation that explains all the available data or evidence, but it doesn't overcomplicate it. So you don't want to just go with the simplest. You want to go with the simplest explanation that also explains all the data. So not just the simplest, it also has to be the simplest and explains all the data. When you see somebody explaining all the data and it's not the simplest, then you apply Occam's razor.
Yeah, and it's not the only criterion. It's one tool. It's one tool in the toolbox. And so keep in mind, sometimes the more complicated explanation is the correct one. But it's basically all else being held equal. The simpler explanation that doesn't overlook. It's like if you said, "Hey, how does this watch work?" and I can completely explain how the watch works in every way in just physical terms, and I say, "Oh, and there's an invisible pixie that lives in there and is moving stuff around." You say, "Well, if you've already explained everything, now if you examine the watch and you figured out that it can't be fully explained in terms of physical parts, then you can start appealing to another. But if you could fully explain it without appealing to something else, why would you appeal to extra things?"
Wasn't the main selling point of Judaism you don't have to kill your kids to praise God? I mean, yeah, that's in the sacrifice of Abraham and Isaac, that whole issue. God prevents it. So yeah, there is this very much idea in Judaism and ancient Yahwehism that we don't sacrifice children. Yeah.
And it kind of flips it, and it's God provides his own sacrifice. I mean,
Right.
that's the story of Abraham and Isaac. You had the surrounding pagans, and the greatest thing you can do, because keep in mind there's a sick logic to the child sacrifice, namely that the value, your devotion to your God is exhibited, is shown by the value of your sacrifice. Here's what I'm willing to sacrifice for my God. And so the most devoted person is the person who is willing to sacrifice what is most precious to him, which would be his child. And therefore, your supreme act of devotion is sacrificing your child. And you get to the God of the Bible, and no, God provides. You don't sacrifice to get to God. God provides his own sacrifice for you to get to God.
Muslims and atheists both have a serious problem with Paul. What is it about Paul's writings that make these two seemingly unaligned groups complain? Paul's more exhaustive in his work, and he sort of adds commentary to what the Christians were teaching. So I think he's just an easy target for them to just sort of cherry pick out things he says and go after easier.
As far as Muslims are concerned, there's a reason there, and it's that according to the Quran, Jesus is a prophet of Islam. According to the Quran, Jesus' original apostles were devout Muslims following Jesus. And when you go to the early Muslim writings, they treated Paul as another apostle. The early Muslim commentaries treated Paul as another apostle. Eventually, Muslims figured out that, hey, we can't blame the Council of Nicaea or something like that for corrupting it, because Muslims believed that Christianity had been corrupted. They didn't know exactly when, so they could say it was corrupted in the 4th century or something like that. The problem was, then people eventually realized, no, actually, every doctrine that you guys are complaining about, we can trace back to the 1st century. So what do you need? If Islam is true, and Jesus is a devout Muslim prophet, and his followers were devout Muslims, how did Christianity get derailed and corrupted in the first century? Well, what do you need? You need someone who wasn't Jesus and wasn't one of the original apostles, who nevertheless was powerful and influential enough to completely change the course of Christianity. When you're looking for who that could be, you only have one option. It's the Apostle Paul. So they would blame the apostle. Muslims need the Apostle Paul to explain why none of the evidence lines up with Islam. And so they have to blame Paul, because if you can't blame Paul, you have no one to blame, and the evidence just makes no sense. So they have to blame Paul as some great deceiver who completely derailed Christianity.
He's the second best of deceivers.
AP, you wanted to say something. What was that?
I was basically going to say the same thing, that that the Muslim reason for opposing Paul would be very different from the atheist reason or other reasons, because it specifically contradicts with Muslim expectations of early Christianity. So they have to blame somebody, and that would be Paul, who extensively writes about what Christianity is and what they believe. In the New Testament, it is clearly laid out. It's like nothing else you find in Scripture, nothing like in the Quran, and you can directly see what Paul says and what Paul preaches, and Muslims find it and they think, oh, look, it's because of this. It's because of Paul. Paul that created this whole thing. He created this whole religion. If it wasn't for him, the Christians would still be true Christians who would follow the true teachings of Jesus that got lost. Maybe Paul deliberately hid it. He buried it, and so on. It's completely stupid reasoning. That's in contradiction with their Muslim beliefs. That's why.
And as far as, so atheists would have different reasons for pointing at Paul. There you're trying to say, okay, because you don't believe, if you're an atheist, you don't believe that Jesus actually rose from the dead and so on. So how did this spread so rapidly? It's just convenient to have, this guy, Apostle Paul, who wasn't there, who wasn't an eyewitness of the things Jesus was doing. He kind of heard some stuff and then he changed it and spread it and so on. And so it's basically what they have in common is that they're both trying to explain the evidence that we have. Whereas the weird thing for me is when you read about the Apostle Paul and you read the letters of Paul, this doesn't seem like some horrible deceiver or something. He seems, the guy endured what was it, the 39 lashes 5 different times, was beaten with rods 3 times, was imprisoned repeatedly, was shipwrecked multiple times. Eventually he was beheaded. This seems like a guy he doesn't seem like a guy who's making stuff up for fun. So he seems very sincere, seems extremely intelligent. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, if you want to say he's wrong, say he's wrong. But this idea that he's this horrible deceiver who's starting a religion to deceive people or throw people off the trail. I'm saying that because I've actually had Muslims insist that Paul was deliberately deceiving people because he viewed the teachings of Jesus as heretical, and therefore to get people away from the heretical teachings of Jesus, he came up with this, like, wait, so he made it more heretical? He came up with an entire false religion to lead people away from the heretical teaching. What? He's such a devout Jew. He's so devoutly Orthodox as a Jew that when he realizes people are following Jesus, he wants to throw them off that trail and completely corrupt that. So wait, so he just like starts an entire religion that conflicts with his belief, and then he goes to his horrible bloody death, getting his head chopped. Anyway, Paul is a problem for everyone because interesting fellow, seems very sincere, went and checked and verified his claims by going to the original apostles and so on, making sure that what he received by revelation actually matched up with what Jesus taught. Seems to be very, very careful, very intelligent person, in the exact right place at the right time. Seems like someone people should be taking seriously as a serious piece of evidence here.
Yeah, if people want to see, check out this video I did called The Hidden Gospel on how Jesus and Paul were preaching the same thing. So, okay, this guy wants to have a debate with us. He says, okay, why didn't God kill David, but his son? Maybe because God is omniscient. He knows the best timeline. And we don't have access to that knowledge.
Like, David serves a very specific purpose, right? I mean, you have to take the what is happening, the story, the plot, everything into consideration. Even if no matter how you look at it, just looking at how the Bible progresses, how it continues, he does things, he is punished for those things in severe ways, and he is then serving as an example for everyone else that would follow after him, as somebody who acknowledges terrible things that he has done, and who begs for forgiveness, and who begs and begs and begs for forgiveness, and writes and sings praises and praise, and is, as a faulty human being, put forward with a purpose, a flawed human being. Why would he be killed, for example? It wouldn't make any sense. You would have a guy who just dies and who has no chance to repent and to show you how to repent and how to feel bad and how to fix yourself.
And it's just really weird. I mean, why didn't God kill David, whose son Solomon was born later, who was going to be king after him, and whose ultimate most relevant descendant is Jesus the Messiah? Like, this is what IP was talking about. Guys, there's some important stuff. David is playing a very important role in some very important stuff that was going to come in the future. Just imagine if God were listening to your advice from way back in the day, and you say, you know what, in 2024, Edward's really going to be confused about this and really complaining. So you know what, let me just kill David. Okay, Edward, imagine a scenario where we could go back in time and God kills King David for his sin. And then we could fast forward to now. The world would be a very different place if God were taking your advice.
I made an argument for God. Where can I send it? You can try emailing through the website. If I have time, I'll look at it. But I get hundreds of emails asking similar things that I just don't have time to get to. So I apologize. Edward's back. Where in the Old Testament does he say, "Hey, we're three up here and one"? Oh, for the love of God, is this a serious question?
Yeah, this is seeming like a troll here.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Hey, IP, have you ever responded to biblical anarchy? He knocked on you and David several times and accused you of misrepresenting scholars. Yeah, he meant I didn't have the same interpretation as him. Therefore, I misrepresented them, which is stupid of an argument, and I don't really care to give him any more attention.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with him at all, so it's great to hear he's knocking on me in videos, but I have no clue who that is.
It's not. Some videos are so bad they're not even worth responding to. How does intuition defined and work in philosophy? It depends on the philosopher.
Intuition is something that's treated very, very differently depending on who you are and which philosopher you are, and among non-philosophers. You know, people will talk about mother's intuition, or cops will talk about, I just got this intuition. It's different from how philosophers are using it.
Yeah, it's in philosophy there's thick and thin views of intuition, and there's variety in there as well. So it's going to be different depending on how you look at it. In moral philosophy, it's tend to just be like these predetermined almost beliefs, but not really ideas we have. It's how we used to judge the world and begin to study things. You can check out Ruth Schaefer Landau on that. Will y'all make a video series on Paul, more specifically on the evidence of his reliability, his conversion, existence, etc.? Also, what books cover this? Check out Testify. He's got some good videos on that, and check out the books he cites. And he cites Stephen Boyce, for example. So check out him.
As far as Paul and the relevance to Islam, I think I have the best video on that. The Vermin Trash Rat. That would be on my channel, and it's just called like Paul versus Muhammad or something like that. But it's like 2 hours because I basically sat down and I compared the Apostle Paul and Muhammad in terms of various ways we can assess their reliability. Like, okay, so if you're talking about their reliability and what they're saying about Jesus, okay, Paul's actually there in the first century. Paul knows the relevant languages. Paul knows the original apostle. There are all sorts of advantages that Paul has and so on. But I go down the line of examining every possible way we could compare these two guys. And I come up with 25 different ways we can assess their reliability in terms of character and so on. And in every single instance, 25 different ways we can compare these guys. Paul wins in every single way. And so when you compile all that, basically Paul is insanely more reliable than someone like Muhammad when we're talking about Jesus. Who can we trust more, Muhammad or Paul? And so the idea is Muslims are blaming Paul for corrupting Christianity because it's the only way they can try and defend Muhammad. But wait a minute, if Paul is massively more reliable than Muhammad, why should we take criticisms of Paul to defend Muhammad seriously when Paul is way more reliable than Muhammad? So anyway, I have a little massive, like 2-hour plus video on that on my channel that you can check out.
Sheikh Mike Wingeling, peace be upon him, says Paul was clearly not a Muslim because there's no P in Allah's language, Arabic. Paul, however, was a Palestinian Muslim whose writings were corrupted. Boom. Gotcha.
His Arabic name is actually Bulus.
Bulus.
So they actually use the B. Bulus.
Couldn't catch the whole thing tonight as I had Bible study, but looking forward to listening back at work tomorrow. I can still pay my jizya, though. Have a great rest of your evening, and God bless. Much appreciated, Solomon. Can you explain why God was regretting making Saul king? So the word regret in Hebrew is a much broader meaning. It's the same word that shows up in Genesis 6, and it doesn't really mean regret, as John Walton has pointed out in his Genesis commentary. It basically means what Walton says. It means like God is sad about something, but he still has to act to fix the situation. So it doesn't really translate to regret, and it's just one of those words that doesn't really translate to anything we have in English. So it's not so much regret. It's that God is sad that Saul was king and he's going to act to fix the situation, according to John Walton. Edward just likes to keep throwing money. Was it okay to torture David's son? Well, the 2 Samuel 12 doesn't say the son was tortured. You've added to the text. So that's not in there.
Good trolling, though, Edward.
Very good. And we'll take the money. Sure. All right, we appreciate you guys coming on the channel. I'll be live on this channel every Monday at 8 Eastern Standard Time because my social media guy says I have to. So I'll be back for sure.
IP trying to be like us.
I know. Copy everything you guys do.
It's like, it works so well for David and AP on Saturday and Sunday. I can't do those days. Let me do Monday. That'll be great.
That's kind of how the conversation went. I can't copy that because that won't really work. So, yes, Daniel was historical, but a lot of scholars don't think he was. All right. With that, I will be live tomorrow as well. We'll be responding to Jake, the Muslim metaphysician, in his recent debate with William of Patristic Pillars, and we'll talk about that. But I'll be back live on this channel next Monday, so I'll let these two guys go. I'll see you guys next time.
I just want to briefly say something in response to a discussion that was in the chat, which was about Paul and Jews. The suggestion that Paul hated Jews or had a problem with Jews. I must say, I recently sat down to read several New Testament, parts of the New Testament, including Romans, which I think is a very, very important read. Reading that alone, you will understand, if you study it, that on the contrary, he did not hate Jews. On the contrary, he loved Jews, and he had lots of hope for Jews, and he spent lots of time writing about his hope for the Jews and God's plan for the Jews, and so on. He even makes the suggestion that God saves the Gentiles to make the Jews jealous and to bring them closer to him and things like that. So certain things were, of course, in the history taken in such ways that Paul never meant them to be taken. But Paul himself was a Jew who had a deep love for Jews. I would say that should not be misrepresented.
And since AP brought up Romans, Paul in the beginning of Romans 9, I'm speaking the truth in Christ. I'm not lying. My conscience bears me witness in the Holy Spirit that I have great sorrow and unceasing anguish in my heart. For I could wish that I myself were accursed and cut off from Christ for the sake of my brothers, my kinsmen, according to the flesh. This is Paul saying that if he could, he would gladly be sacrificed. He would gladly be sacrificed for his fellow Jews. But that doesn't sound like a guy who just hates Jews and wants them all to burn in hell.
Allah made it appear like he likes Jews.
The law is very strong.
Very strong. Very strong with that. All right, we will close this out, and I'll see you guys tomorrow and next week, this day, same time.